Well, welcome to our monthly committee of the whole meeting. It is Thursday, July 13th. And I know the temptation it is to maybe, delay a middle of July meeting. It's a beautiful day outside. I hope you all got out for a little bit today. I know that we have some really important presentations, but again, this is Thursday, July 13th. It is 3:45, 3:43, somewhere like that. And this is the monthly committee of the whole meeting. This is a place where no actions are taken, no votes are taken by the school board, but the information presented is so important. This is the real meat of the things that we then address again in vote at the school board meeting. So to our community that watches us online on our YouTube site, we welcome you too, and know that this is the best way to be transparent. This is the best way to allow our community to know the workings of the school board, and it is the best way for our presenters, our staff that come to us every month with important information. And so we have two items on the agenda today. We have a presentation by our special services, and Assistant Superintendent Bond will introduce us and our community to our presenters. And we also have a presentation after this, our second presentation from the Baird group that will come in and discuss a very important topic on referendum and levy information. So an important meeting in a beautiful day. So welcome. I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Bond.
Thank you, Chair Loper, and good evening, everyone.
Take attendance? We do take attendance. We do. Even though it's not official, we do like to know who's here. So I'll turn it over to Clerk Sadowski.
We'll be brief, really brief. So, Member Eden, here. Member Kirby, here. Member Lafayette, here. Member Wilco,
here.
Member Oswald is excused. I am here. Member Sandholm,
Here.
Superintendent Magus,
Here.
Assistant Superintendent Bonds,
Present.
and Deputy Clerk Zimich. Here. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you again. And now I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Bonds.
Thank you.
Please remember to introduce our presenters as well. I know you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Loper, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As you indicated during the COW meeting, this is our opportunity to really share a lot of insights to programming, and this programming that we provide our students is, in my mind, exceptional, and it's something that I wanted the board to have an opportunity to hear all of the things we offer students. And these are our students with special needs, and we have our director, Jason Crane, is here, as well as Assistant Director Laura Thurston is here to make a presentation. I'm going to turn it over quickly to them because they have a pretty detailed presentation. I want to allow them an opportunity to go through it, and you have a chance to ask questions.
Thanks, Mr. Brown's. Members of the board, superintendents, honored guests, it's a pleasure to be here to talk about special education. I would love to do this monthly because special education, as you well know, is so detailed and so complex, but we're not going to be able to cover everything today. But our intent is to give you a high-level overview of what's happening, including some data numbers, some financial numbers, and allow you to ask some questions as well. I need to start off by just celebrating the large number of people that contributed to the input to this, and Laura Thurston is one of those people. But Simone, our business manager, Brenda Vietz, Kayla Carroll, Tanya Lake, and our TOSAs were all contributors to today's presentation, so keep those people in mind. One other topic before we get going. I've done many school board presentations. I had a time slot about 8 years ago that was designated for 10 minutes, and it took an hour and a half. The topic that night was lice. So I won't be expanding my time, but you were probably there. I will try to stick within time limits, and one of the things that might help with this presentation is if maybe you stick a pin in your questions, and we can always come back to them at the end of the presentation, because I envision some of your questions are going to be answered as we go through the slides. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. So I will gladly honor questions, and if something does come up in the middle of the slide, feel free to ask, but if we can kind of gather those at the end, it will probably help our time frame. All right, so slide number 2, Jim. So just as an overview here, our department serves, and recent legislation has changed to serving students up till 22 years of age. That changed the last legislation session. So birth through 22 years of age, so we do have employees that meet families in the hospital that have newborn babies that have complications, and we start serving as early as birth. Our department serves students attending our public and private schools. We also have residential facilities in our district. We have students receiving services in mental health care centers, child care, and preschools. An interesting data point is we have over 440 daycare facilities in Duluth Public Schools area. We're probably in about 55 to 50 of those, not all 440. But if the need arises, we would need to go to any one of those 440 daycare and provide service in those sites. Targeted services is what we do, and it's based upon eligibility. Students have to qualify for services, and we can talk a little bit about that in the next coming slides, but there's different ways to pull data, and I noticed the Baird number was different. Their number in the report in June said 20%, but it depends on how you present the information. So when I calculated our K through 21 students on IEPs compared to our overall enrollments, our percentage of student population is 23% of students receiving services on IEPs. Next slide, please, Shannon. Laura, I have to cue you. Anytime you want to add information, and I'll call on you, but feel free. Laura did a nice job of really helping with this presentation, so I don't want to forget about Laura. What is special education? So as I just said, targeted services in any one of these unique areas: cognitive deficits, academic, communicative, speech services, social emotional supports, motor ability, vocational. We do a lot. Once students reach 8th grade, we do a vocational assessment as they enter high school, and we do a lot with work experience, getting kids out to practice those skills so they're ready once they graduate. Sensory, physical, behavioral, functional needs, and any one of these students will have an IEP that delineates the needs and services, and the IEP is an individual education plan, of course. Next slide reviews the categories that students may qualify in any one of those areas of need. And Minnesota state criteria sets that category as well as federal regulation. One of the concepts in special education is called child find. And child find means that if anyone raises a hand to say, I have suspicions about this child's ability, we can perform assessments to determine if that child qualifies for special education services. A doctor can give a referral, a teacher can give a referral, a parent can give a referral. And that process is called child find. In early childhood, birth through 5, there is no MTSS system. And MTSS is a multi-coordinated set of tiered interventions where oftentimes in kindergarten through 12th grade, we try things first, but in early childhood, we don't try things. We evaluate right away. There's no wait period for intervening with the child in early childhood services. So our eval team has a very strict guideline in early childhood. 45 days from the time we get the referral, it must be complete. So we have an evaluation team in early childhood, and they do over 300 evaluations a year. And this last year we were up. The average is 300, but last year we were over 300. So that's a lot of evaluations for early childhood students, just pointing that out. At any one site like Denfeld High School, they might evaluate 100 students, and many of those student evaluations are re-evaluations, but just shows you the difference between the intense number of students that we're taking a look at in early childhood. Anything to add, Laura?
Yes, sir.
All right, next slide. So I just want to highlight some of our successes, and Laura, if you'd help me with some of these. I'll cover the first bullet point, though, this graduation rate. We've been talking about Check and Connect a lot. It really does make a large difference for special education students as well. And I just want to lift up the Check and Connect program that we have. We have it in middle school and high school and at the Area Learning Center. And that's doing a large impact on our IEP students making it through graduation.
So the next 3 bullets that you see up there are successes that we've had this year. When I first arrived in November, our research teachers and our site principals had identified a potential gap in our reading instruction with our non-readers or our very early readers, our K1 and 2 readers, that perhaps we didn't have the right curriculum designed to meet their needs. So we pulled a group of teachers together early this spring and talked to them, and they agreed that we have a gap in our instruction. We set forward some non-negotiables as we went forward, that if we were going to explore, and we would explore, finding a different curriculum, that we would all agree to use the curriculum and not go off in our favorite curriculum or what we have in our back pocket is what we've been trained on. because we want to not continue inherently creating gaps when a kid travels from school to school and is exposed to different curriculums. So we wanted them all to have a consistent curriculum. That was one non-negotiable. And the other was that we would also be able, by being consistent with the curriculum, we would be able to start collecting data, which we can't do now, it's flawed. And so I was so pleased with our teachers, and I want to celebrate them that they came together. They found the curriculum that they want to use, which is aligned with the science of teaching reading, which is huge emphasis right now with MDE, and it's across the nation really. And so we'll be using what I have up there is the UFI curriculum, and the teachers to date have been trained. Principals are aware of it, and we'll be implementing that curriculum next year. This will be with our K1 and 2 students. We've also expanded our continuum of services. We have, as Jason highlighted, a large influx of students, and so we had a need to add some more classrooms. I celebrate the leadership in this district for intentionally making efforts to provide opportunities for students to attend at their home school. That was a difficult process because some of our campuses, as you know, are very crowded for space. Space is at a premium, but with their leadership and their focus on ensuring that kids could receive their services at their home school with their peers, we were able to secure 2 more sites, or actually 3 more. One site had the potential, we just hadn't done it yet. So we now have the ability to bring some kids back home to receive services in their home school, as well as serve the incoming students that's in their community school. And then finally, an increase in MA billing, that is our medical assistance billing. That is really an untapped resource for us, simply because we haven't been able to have the level of oversight needed. And Jason and I are committed to ensuring that we're capturing every potential dollar out there. And so we've started to see an uptick in that as well, and we'll continue on that.
Let me go back to just the expansion of continuum of services, because it sounded a little cryptic and I expect a question on that. So let's answer it for you. So at Lowell, Congdon, and Lester Park, we have expanded setting 3 opportunities for students to receive services because we have the need. We've had an increase in student population. We're receiving students back that pre-pandemic weren't with us, and now they are. And some schools in the local area, some students are choosing not to go to those other schools, and they're coming back to the Duluth schools, which is a wonderful thing. But we need to expand our programs because of that. So we didn't have a setting 3 program at Lowell, for example. Now we will next year, and the students from that attendance area can attend their home school. And then lastly, the STEPS Setting 4 program is going to be operational, and there's 2 classrooms for special education at Rock Ridge site, and we've been talking about that for a while. So that's the expansion. Let's go to the funding slide. Lori, you want to help a little bit with this, or?
You got it.
Oh, I got it, all right. So there are many special education funding sources. We've put some of our large funding sources in there. State and federal funds are obviously 2 of our largest sources. One that's not on here is the grant budget. For example, ADSIS, CEIS, they're not on the sheet, but those are just grant funded things where we apply for those, we declare those applications with the state of Minnesota, and then they approve or deny our request. And they often always approve our request. So our largest funding source is obviously our state funds, and our projected budget for this year was 22, as it said, but we're spending more than that because of our increases. We had to add positions in the midst of this year. We added 5 speech positions throughout the course of this year. In response to the increased speech caseloads, our staff was overwhelmed, so we had to give them some support. So we'll have 5 more speech teachers next year than we did at the start of this year. I have to correct that. We only added 2 this year, but by next year we're going to add 5.
So 3 more.
Unless there's a specific question on this, I can maybe take those questions at the end, but maybe we just need to keep rolling.
I just really wanted you to clarify first. So 2 for the 23-24 year, and then 3 for the following year, or 2 this
Yeah, we
year?
posted those 3 at the end of the school year. And we did have some speech, but we tried to find more over the end of the school year. We couldn't, so we had some overload situations. And I've been guided toward the concept of not finding overloads, but find people that can staff those positions is more attractive for the district. Trying to say that as politically correct as possible. Any other funding questions on this slide?
So
So is that a net income of $1.4 million, or are you saying that's a deficit?
1.4, which,
The 1.4 is our MA billing.
Is
So
your MA billing?
at the end of June, we had net income of 1.4 million.
and we are typically under $1 million for our billing, so we're radically increasing that. Great question.
Projected state budget. Did you-
Projected state budget, meaning, oh, yeah, I should cover that. So typical state budget typically increases on whatever the state formula increases. So 4% is reasonable and what we expected the legislature to pass. So that's the formula we use to increase our special education expected budget for the next year. That make sense?
So your expected budget is 23 million some odd,
Yep.
and then what is your projected expenditures for next year?
We hope to stay within that threshold.
Okay.
We hope.
And nowhere do you see your cross-subsidy money in there, or does that go to general fund?
That's on the next slide.
Okay.
So great question. And it's the third
I
bullet.
knew that, I was
You're
leading you.
cueing me to the next slide, yeah. So it's the third bullet point on there. The special education department is not fully funded. It's on average about 55% funded through special education funds through the state budget. And then the 11 million is just a rounded number to say that we do have about 11 million coming out of the general fund to help cover the excess costs not covered by special education.
Could you say that first statement again about the underfunded percentage you just gave?
Well, we're not fully funded. And
Right.
I think there was a little bit of an increase, which I don't know all the calculations in my head right now, Simone, but the legislator even toyed with the concept of fully funding special education, but it didn't end up that way.
Came out at 44%.
Okay.
For year one, and then 60% for year two?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's 50%. I think it's 50%.
We'll have to check on that, but
And then there's some push at the federal level too, right now.
Yeah.
Right now, we are pushing for our federal government, and we as school board members will certainly be advocating, and we will be visiting our local representatives to continue to look at the federal dollars that will come our way. So we'll be a team of working to get more money.
yeah. So in all actuality, the special education budget doesn't settle up for a couple years past this coming school year. There's calculations and lots of checks and balances, so that's just a reality to expect. And one MDE report that says that it takes about $11,300 to educate one special education student. That's an average of all of our students, but that's averaging all students together. So some students are less expensive to educate, and some students are much more expensive to educate. An example of a student that would be more expensive would be maybe a student that has 2 paraprofessionals to make sure that they can be successful throughout the day. And we do have a small number of those students in our district. Moving on, slide 8. Laura, do you want to cover this one?
Sure, so Jason has already spoken to some of our largest increases. We did see a huge growth this year. And the biggest growth was in our ECSE speech, which is why we went ahead and hired or put forth a request to hire some more speech services. And then the second area of growth is in developmental delay, which also comes with early childhood. And once they hit 5 years old, we have to reevaluate, and at that time, they typically lose the DD or developmental delay eligibility, and they gain a different eligibility. So those were the areas where we saw the biggest growth was in our early childhood, particularly in speech services, but overall in our early childhood altogether, and you'll see that in some slides. Specific learning disorders was another area of growth for us, and then you'll see the setting 3 students, especially in kindergarten, needing services, and that's what's resulted in those needs for those digital classrooms that Jason spoke to at Lowell, Congdon, and Wester Park. So those were some of our largest areas of increase this year of students.
I can give just a couple reports that I've read of why some of these early childhood numbers. During the pandemic, masking was a major impact on young children being able to learn expressive language, so to speak, not seeing the role modeling, wearing a mask. And then another key indicator was during the pandemic, there was a loss of childcare support in many areas across the state of Minnesota. So families weren't sending their child to a childcare center when kids can get a rich exposure to other students and learning opportunities, and they missed out on those opportunities. So that's why we're seeing a large number of early childhood students qualify for services, because they're behind. We have the largest number of students ever entering kindergarten on an IEP this fall than we've ever had.
If I can answer the question, going back to the special aid process subsidy, I put up the document what the state approved. So it's 44% in FY 24 through 26, and then it's 50% in FY 27 and later. So it's 44 and 22.
All right, slide 9. Another data slide. These numbers, I have to explain, include K through 12 students and early childhood special education, both in the calculation. So it would be different if you take out the early childhood numbers. And it is a historical perspective back to pre-pandemic, that would be 2019. You'll see a number of starting enrollment on all students and IEPs at 1759. I know from 15 years ago, we were at 1,400 students and being quite consistent for a 10-year pattern of Duluth Public Schools having 1,400 students on IEPs. So if you progress through this slide, you'll see an ebb and flow up and down each school year. And obviously the down at the end of the school year is our seniors graduating off IEPs, not being enrolled in school anymore. But as we reevaluate new students, those enrollments on IEPs gain over the course of the school year. And this is the highest number of students on IEPs, that 2222 number that we calculated within the students that we're supporting right now than we've ever had in the schools. So it's a large increase in students on IEPs. We're a part of the system. We're working as a district on MTSS structures to improve some things so that not as many students end up on IEPs, but we're working on it together. Any questions about this slide?
Do you think 2,222 at the end of this year on IEPs are all within our ISD 709 boundaries, or does this represent students that choose to come to Duluth because of our rich special education?
What's included in the 222 is our residential sites, that for, if a student is from Hibbing, attending at Merritt Creek, Rock Ridge, any one of those sites, they're in that 222 number.
Okay.
But if a Duluth Public Schools resident is attending school in Proctor, it's not in this number.
But if a Proctor student is on an IEP attending a Duluth school,
yes.
It's in this.
Yes.
But we don't really track that information.
But we do.
Oh.
Yeah, it's revenue for the district that helps us, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Back to this slide, where you said early childhood special education ended with 367 students, so that was for this past year.
Yep.
And then you had mentioned in the slide before that the largest number of students entering kindergarten on IEPs. Will there be more students added, because maybe there are students that will come in that haven't had IEPs yet as kindergartners?
Well, we obviously evaluate all school year long, so
Right.
kindergarten
So
class,
that's-
we'll have on average 10 to 20 students evaluated over the course of a year. Not all students qualify.
Right.
We do have a very high percentage of hit rate for the kids that are referred once they're in kindergarten through 12th grade. So that's a positive. We didn't have a very high hit rate 20 years ago, but we do now. And a phenomenon like at Norma MacArthur, they typically get 10 students on an IEP. This fall, they'll probably likely get 20 students on an IEP. So nearly double of students on IEPs entering some of our elementary sites.
And just a reminder that with our early childhood, we are providing service or going out and meeting those families all summer. So those will be families that will join us in the fall as our staff is out meeting with them now.
And the numbers are increasing daily or changing daily, right? In terms of the number of students or new students that are enrolling in our district. We talk every day, or I'm signing papers every day related to new students to our district for a variety of reasons. So enrollments are increasing in this area. And that's why we thought it was so important that we, provide an opportunity for the board to be fully aware of what we offer our community here and appreciate all the services we offer our students with special needs, and just hear some of the increases that have made and some challenges or the impact of those increases. So I'll stop there because I want to stay on time.
You bet. Next slide. So I was guided towards trying to inform the board about staffing levels, and it's been open mic comments at times. I've come to some school board and heard some pretty interesting comments from parents. It comes up a lot at what is called our quality steering committee, even from our staff, wondering about can we add some additional language, maybe into our contracts related to staffing levels. So our staffing levels are guided by federal regulations, state statute, and Minnesota Department of Education has some workload, caseload recommendations that they've published for every school district in the state of Minnesota. In general, if a student needs an intense amount of service from a special education case manager and a team of people, likely that student might be in a setting 3 or 4 program, and that will have a lower caseload for that case manager. And then to contradict that, if a student needs a little bit of service, maybe from one speech teacher, that speech teacher might see that student once a week, and that speech teacher will likely have a little bit higher caseload because they can handle the volume of work because they're seeing that student less. Same as for a resource teacher. They typically have an average of 15 to 17 students on their caseload. That's different from a setting 3 teacher that will probably have a 6 caseload, and that's capped. If it for sure is severe profound, that's capped at 1 teacher, recommended by the state of 1 paraprofessional, but we staff them at 1 teacher and 2 paras in Duluth schools. So I have those numbers in my head. I didn't want to overwhelm you with those data numbers, but just in general, we have guidance. We are well within our caseload limits, and we're continuing to work with our units to maybe craft some more language where we can have a clearer understanding in Duluth schools. So that's a project we're working on. Any
So that
questions?
we hear reflections that are, especially I hear it more at the high school level, that our resource teachers are, that the class sizes are large, like, or that their caseload is large, like 1 resource teacher for 30 students.
That might be their workload, meaning that that's how many students they have contact over the day.
Right.
But no case manager has 30 students on their caseload.
Sitting in their class every hour. They might
Our
have
caseloads
4.
have never been better than they are this past school year across our resource case managers. Part of the reason we've targeted that as an area of focus, and we are doing really well with ensuring that caseloads. When I was at Denfeld High School, I started 1 year at 29. Nobody started this year at 29. They were all under 20, actually.
But that's a caseload.
That's a
And it's
caseload.
not what's sitting in their classroom every hour of the day, which I think is a misperception
Yep.
too from our community people that don't often get into the daily looking into classrooms.
Right.
Paul and I sub in those classrooms a lot, and yeah, I might sub in a special education high school resource room and have 4 kids, but that teacher probably has a caseload of 22 kids, but they don't see them.
Probably at
every day.
18 in the high schools,
Okay.
18 and under 20.
Okay.
That's what we strive for. Now, what factors into that too is a little bit, in going off on a tangent, which I probably shouldn't do, but real quick. An
I got you.
EDD case manager that handles more severe kids, like I did at Denfeld, 5 years or better, I would have a little bit lower caseload, and then the LD teachers would accommodate that, might have a little bit higher caseload, and then might be just bubbling over 20. But we try not to have anybody be at 29 anymore.
What's the definition of caseload, or does that stay consistent over a period of time?
A caseload is the students that are assigned to you as a case manager. So our resource teachers and the EBD teacher and LD teacher will have a caseload. A psychologist does not have a caseload, but they have a workload. They have to do evaluations, but they don't have a caseload.
So as a caseload, my question then would be is so a caseload would be 1 student, but that 1 student could have a myriad differences between the next student. So is there,
And that's
how do you
called setting
control for that?
levels.
Okay, so that's setting levels. So
And
you
that's
look at-
factored into it, and that's my example of when a student needs more intense services, they might have a setting 3 IEP, and that setting is determined by the service grid and how much time they're pulled away from their general education peers to be just in a special education room environment by themselves, no longer with general education students. That raises their setting level.
So then when you talk about caseload and setting levels, then how do you control for that across the caseload for 1 individual? So if a kid is a setting 4, right, is that equal as a kid who's a setting 2?
No, So they would have, the setting 2 case manager would have more kids. The setting 3 case manager, especially if it's severe profound. We have some classrooms where we have 1 teacher, 6 kids, probably 5 paraprofessionals.
Got it.
And that's the caseload.
So the caseload then would be specific to setting level, so you don't have 1 teacher that has 2 setting 3s, 1 setting 4, and 8 setting. That's just my
Yeah,
curiosity.
exactly. But we do have multi-categorical rooms. One of them is at Lester Park, for example, where we do have a student with intense services that are like setting 3, needs lots of medical supports, uses a wheelchair, and also has a lot of setting 2 kids on the caseload.
So you're controlling for the
Yeah,
setting
so that
levels.
case manager could
Okay.
have 10, they're probably not gonna have 6, but they're not gonna have 17.
Okay, that's all I'm wondering, it's just how you control for that.
These are the details that I could come back each month for, but
Yeah.
these are great questions. Yeah, let's stop there, but if there's more questions, I'd be glad to answer some. So in an effort to stay on time, we've only got a couple slides left, and then we'll answer some questions. Laura, you want to help me out with the school designations?
Sure, this is really just a review, maybe a reminder that that the state comes in after all the testing is done and they assign designations to a district or to schools. And if they reassign those designations, I think our next reassignment is next year, next summer after the testing. So this is just really information that Dr. Lake has already presented in her beginning of the year state of the district information. So just a reminder that Lowell, for instance, there are other schools that in the district that have been given designations. These are strictly the ones that are impacted by special education. So you'll see that Lowell, for instance, was targeted performance for special education due to math and reading performance with their special education students. Then you have Myers and Piedmont with comprehensive performance. Laura MacArthur is in a special category because they're a Title I group, and so they get an additional consideration for how they perform in relationship to other Title I schools, and you see that there. And then Congdon is one that didn't meet the exit criteria from a previous identification, so they're one that we're still monitoring. We're hoping that they will exit out this next year. And then Stowe is in needs improvement for math and reading. Again, I just want to remind you that this is special education only. There are other, in Dr. Lake's presentation, there are other designations, but this is the special ed impact.
But aren't there other Title I, like isn't Stowe and Myers Title I schools?
So within the Title I schools, where you rank, if you rank, and I have it on there that Laura MacArthur performed in the lowest 5% of the Title I schools, so they raised their designation level. Yeah.
Okay.
So
And
they
it's
have
5% title across the state.
State.
So the entire state, so.
an additional recognition, dubious recognition might be, you might say, because of their Title I performance.
And that's why it's important, that's why I thought it was really important that Jason and his team had an opportunity to really come and share with the board. We are very transparent on, the designations that exist. We are very transparent on that we have a significant number of students with special needs, and that number is increasing. And unfortunately, we have areas where we have a lot of improvement needed for those students with special needs. Clearly, performance is not where we want them to be, and Jason and Laura, especially Laura with joining Jason and his team this year, have stepped up and have made some programmatic changes that they're going to continue to review with us in a moment, which involves some changes in staffing to really support our special education programming, to ensure that staff are really adhering not only to state statutes, but are really using strategies that's going to improve outcomes. So I'll stop there again.
Yeah, you set me up real nice for the last 2 slides, but Ms. Lafayette, do you have a comment?
Just confirming again, the Title I schools are Laura MacArthur, Myers Wilkins, Piedmont, Lowell, and Stowe.
I need someone
Yes,
with more
I'm
Duluth
going
experience.
through my head too,
Yeah.
like, yes.
Yeah, I just
That's great.
want to, really for the public to
Yes.
be clear on our elementary Title I schools, yeah.
So as Anthony just said, that we're transforming our department team a little bit. We've only added 1 new position though, and it's a supervisor position. So with the increased number of student population and growth, We're not asking for much, but we have been approved to add a supervisor, and we're transforming some of our previously called TOSA positions, because TOSAs can't evaluate staff. And one of the things that we need support with is really supporting and evaluating special education employees. With only 2 directors trying to get around to over 450 employees in our department, we are the largest department in the district. It's complicated. This new structure will help us a bunch, and it's going to help not only with supervision, but accountability, training for our administrators, training for our staff. We will be more available than ever.
Principals don't do evaluations of staff?
They do. We get mostly involved with non-tenured staff, and this last school year we had 130 special education employees in the non-tenured category. That's a lot of employees.
Good to know.
Yeah, and our non-tenure process, as you know, goes 3 years long, so we have a mentorship program in our department as well that supports people through 3 years, and if people need help in the 4th and 5th, we will do that as well. But principals do some components of evaluation, even for non-tenured employees, and historically, I apologize, my phone's ringing, and I don't know why. Because a spam risk. Principals do tenured staff, majority throughout the district, but if there are concerns or improvement needs, then Laura or I always get involved. So does that clarify the administrative support? All right. I don't know that I need to talk about my whole structure in this department, but I'd gladly answer questions if there are any. So let's go to the last slide, and then we'll get to questions. The last slide really highlights some of our large improvement special education goals for next year. And Laura, you can help me with this, but the STEPS program is ready to go. We still are, I was even out there today at Rock Ridge just finalizing some last minute details. Want to make sure that the bus times line up, want to make sure that we get specialists, get our teachers the preps that they deserve, and aligning just some last details as we work through the summer months. We have a lot of our employees hired for the STEP program.
Can you just give a thumbnail on what it steps, just a reminder?
Yeah, I gotta remember the acronym now. Success through empowerment,
And positive support.
positive supports, and we've used that term in the past, but that really is a positive connotation for a setting 4 program. We'd like to use the word STEP rather than setting 4, and social workers have been hired, supervisors have been hired, 2 teachers have been hired. We're working through interviewing several paraprofessionals. Laura and our team are feverishly interviewing every day for our open positions. A few weeks ago, it was before the end of June, we have over 55 employees yet to hire, and I don't know the exact number now, but I feel like we're under 30.
So what need is STEPS providing us or filling?
So we even had a district audit done by MDE in 2018, and they interviewed staff, they interviewed students, they interviewed administrators. And one of the largest findings in that report identified that we didn't have a full continuum of services, and many students with the most intense behavioral needs, homebound was their only placement option for success, and that shouldn't be. So our STEPS program is really going to fill a need to have our most at-risk students with emotional and or behavioral needs attend school, and they can attend school every day, full days of school programming. And that has been a missing continuum option in Duluth schools, so we're excited to bring that to Duluth Public Schools.
We always, IEP development is on there, but I could come back to you next year and it would still be on there because it's a continued area of focus. It's as we bring on new folks and as we continue to train up folks, IEP development is always an area that we work on.
Can I highlight, because some recent late May school board audience member coming up to the mic highlighted some choices that were made by the district that I didn't necessarily agree with. IEP development is done jointly with the family, and it always requires a prior written notice to be signed by the parent to say, I agree with this program. And feel free to ask me questions, and Anthony and John both did, about some of the things that came to the school board in May as parents stood up at open mic and had some concerns. They should have been a part of the process, and they can always voice that back to their IEP team, and if it's not working, they can change their IEP. So just want to emphasize that IEP development is always done jointly with the parent, should be done jointly with the parent, and they give permission and approval before implementing.
Absolutely. So we've already highlighted the number of students coming back to school from shortened day or home-based assignments. That was an area of emphasis, a big push for us this year, especially in the spring. The instruction we've already talked about. We've already talked about the medical assistance billing capacity. And then a new area that we want to develop next year, especially as we bring on additional supervisor positions, is our ability to create and customize professional development for our staff, because it is unique. And as we have more staff available now, we have the opportunity, we believe, to really fine tune and really meet the needs of our staff, and they're asking for it, which is encouraging. They're wanting the professional development, especially our paraprofessionals. They're wanting the specifically designed professional development. So we're excited to be able to craft that and bring that forward next year. So I'm highlighting that as an area of improvement for our department next year, because I think it's really going to only increase the capacity of our staff to serve our kids.
Questions?
Do our special education teachers, when they're in their building assignments, do they engage in the PLCs that other subject matters do, or does that not really work for our special education teachers? So what I'm thinking about is, in my, English teachers gather, or ninth grade English teachers gather, do our special education staff within our buildings have opportunity for PLCs, or?
They do, they do, but there's some John and Anthony remind me, there's some conflicting efforts that there's concerns about whether special education teachers should do PLCs or something else. Remind me what the something else is.
Was it chicken connect?
I don't know if I knew it now, but yes, they can participate, but I don't remember what the conflict is right now off the top of
It
my head.
might be their, just the way they schedule and the way their prep time is, and their assigned process time
That's correct.
might not allow for
That
that.
could be it. I mean,
Yeah.
sorry that I don't remember.
No, you're
that
spot
right
on,
now.
and that's exactly what it is. There's a conflict there in terms of time. And so with the due process time that they have to complete, it impacts time they need available to plan, and some of that time is then spent in the evening, or excuse me, not evening, after school doing that, and that then interferes with their ability to make it to PLCs, or to be able to PLC as often as others. So it comes down to time.
And on a related note, we have a PLC committee that's working with the DFT, looking at our PLCs and rebooting our PLCs. And so I think it's important when we think about, I think it's just as important for special ed teachers to be part of that PLC and learn about the different subject areas and be able to increase their skills there to serve kids. So we want to try and find ways of doing that. Also, having worked in a school where our special ed teachers were part of PLC work, a lot of times there's a cross-pollination of ideas. The subject area people gain insight from the special ed teachers about how to better serve kids with different needs, and the special ed teachers sometimes learn how to better work with the curriculum that's being taught in that area. But it is important for us to balance that workload piece, so that's what we have as a committee work moving forward.
I just have a quick question about the MA billing increase, because that was a significant increase. Would you say, in part, that might be due to like the higher numbers of special ed students, or increased staff capacity, or?
That's Laura cracking the whip.
Yeah.
She really did a lot of training this year, heightened levels of expectation. Several different employees might think of MA billing as a low priority. Laura refocused that priority and really put a lot of energy to that. So I just want to lift up Laura's efforts.
Yeah, two quick things. One, say again what STEPS stands for.
Success through.
Empowerment and positive supports.
Okay. And then the other question, Laura, had to do with the professional development. You kind of referenced, and I'm excited that, we've heard a lot of staff wanting more professional development, especially paras. So will that happen this coming year? And does that have to do with contract language as well? Will they get paid for it? I mean, I don't want you to go in the weeds of it, but I just
So
That's a question
my
you
safe
get.
answer to say for that question is yes. And I've been networking with Ms. Severance on ideas.
Okay.
And I think that's being proposed right now with significant paraprofessional increase, staff development opportunities. One of the things for certified staff development is we've been doing IEP development training for years. We host monthly sessions on topics and we will customize and go to specific sites, but it's been optional. So we'd like to get back to mandatory and find a time to make sure that our staff are pulled and then they can't say I was never trained. Our success rate monthly was about 30% of our certified employees that came to those trainings. So we'd like to get it to more like 100%, everybody's been trained and nobody can screw up now.
And I want to point out, and John, you can refresh my memory as well. I know there were a number of days or hours added to the past contract for additional training opportunities for our paraprofessionals. In addition to that, we use ESSER dollars. Significant ESSER dollars are used for professional development overall. And I know paras also took advantage of those additional opportunities that were provided through ESSER as well. So it's really important. We try to make sure, back to special ed, that our staff, all of them, have the skills and abilities and know-how to really meet the needs of our students. As you can see, we have some significant areas of improvement. The team is working hard to figure things out, and always right. We're chasing every dollar, and so it is a priority. It is an expectation for staff to make sure that we chase every dollar that we can to offset the cost to support our students, because we want to support our students the best we can.
Okay, I just had a couple comments and then a question. So with that number of staff and adding that supervisor, what is the goal to how often you want to observe your staff so that you can offer them that positive, constructive helpfulness and how they deal? Like, what is the goal for that?
I haven't written that goal down yet,
Okay.
but that's a great targeted question to focus on for us. But so, for example, it's part of our visions, and we're going to go off on a story again, but using some of those supervisor positions to connect with elementary.
Yeah.
Maybe one of them is assigned to elementaries and have a rotation of days where they are expected to be at that building. They can attend IEP meetings, they can evaluate the teacher, they can connect with the principal. Same at the secondary level. A different supervisor would be in attendance. We want these people out in the district.
Yep. I'm very supportive of that, because if we're going to budge those graduation rates of special education kids, we have to make sure that the staff that they're dealing with are trained with the latest. So, and then that leads me to my next question. You talked about changing how we're teaching reading. How is that? So my son is dyslexic and dysgraphic, right? He's on a 504. That's what I chose, not an IEP. You have a little bit more room to breathe in a 504 versus an IEP. His support isn't great, right? And that's just how it works. So do you see that the way we're changing this literacy and how we're teaching reading, do you see that affecting more students? And then what does that look like in wraparound services when they start to get into middle school and high school? If they have these challenges in reading, in English, how are we supporting them in science? How are we supporting them in history? How are we supporting them in reading? So do you see this changing the way that we're teaching them reading is going to give them a little bit more?
Sure. Just speaking generally, when we identified the gap, our curriculum that we have right now to serve students with IEPs really assumes that a student comes in with some comprehension, some fluency, some word sound, word letter recognition, sound recognition. For your kindergarten 1 and 2s, those are when the kids are first learning the word sound recognition and putting words, sounds together to make words, all of that. And our curriculum that we had at the time, or that we have currently, doesn't really have that in it. So this youth-like curriculum is very intense on working with those kids and working on those special skills. It also is an identified resource for dyslexia.
Yeah.
And so we're very excited about that, because that now is really providing an intentional instruction to our students with dyslexia. And that's not something I could have probably touted before. I don't know that we could have really said that we were providing an overview and we were doing our best. But this curriculum really works on students that have dyslexia, dysgraphia, and all the other DISs. So, yes, the teachers were also putting together Mr. Bonds approved the letters cohort, so a lot of our teachers had gone through, MDE had put together, I want to say it was a $2 million grant for teachers that wanted to go through the letters training, which is the science of reading. It's extremely intensive, but we had a lot of teachers in this district that opted into that program, and so that grant ended, and so we worked with Mr. Bonds to be able to put together a cohort now of teachers that are going to be our trainers, and then in the fall we'll put together a cohort of our own teachers to go through that training as well. Through the READ legislation that was passed, we believe we'll be reimbursed for that. They haven't fully come out with all the details of that, but we're doing, the district is making the initial investment to go ahead and put some trainers together, and then in the fall we'll put together our own cohort of teachers. So those are, I can't get into the science of what's going to happen later on, but I'm so excited about the foundation we're building right now for our littlest teachers.
I know, I'm thrilled for that because it's just gonna make a huge difference for kids. I saw how my kid went through it and it just never, and then when I got the outside support, that made a difference because that's how he learned to read, was on that outside with the, so I want to thank you both for paying attention to that. And then lastly, I want to say my youngest just graduated off of his IEP for speech, Julie Erickson at Piedmont, so I want to lift up the wonderful speech pathologists here in the district. Just did amazing all the way through the pandemic on his little Google call when he would work with her and do that. So I just want to lift up those speech pathologists. So thank you, and thank all of your staff. I appreciate you all very much.
Thank you. And I want to add to what Laura said, and I'll call on the superintendent Magus, because not only is the science of reading something that special ed is focused on, it's something that the district is focused on overall. So pre-K-12, it will be a focus for next year. Our staff are already planning to make sure that training happens and that we make sure that all of our teachers are trained in the science of teaching. So we're really excited about the science of teaching and reading.
We almost made it.
We almost made it. Superintendent Magus.
Actually, what Laura said and what Anthony said was what I was going to bring up, that really the science of reading is hugely important. It's a central strategy to what we want to do. The state has recognized it as being something that having greater focus on phonemic awareness is really critical for early readers and all readers. And so I'm really glad for the pioneering efforts that we have. I'm glad for what we're doing with special ed. But I also look at how are we going to provide that universal best practice that's going to live for everybody. So fewer kids are going to need 504s and fewer kids are going to need special ed because they're going to have their needs met through improved instruction for all.
One question. Looking at the special education disability categories, are special ed students in our district spread throughout those, or are there certain categories where they...
Certain categories are called higher incident categories, and other categories are called low incidence. Specific learning disability would be a high incident, lots of students on IEPs for specific learning disabilities. Speech, lots of students on IEPs for speech. Deaf and hard of hearing, low incidence. Physical impairment, low incidence, so not that many. December child count for specific learning disability was 582 students. Child count for deaf blind students in Duluth Public Schools, 0. So, traumatic brain injury, 3. Great question, Dr. Kirby.
Anything else? No,
That's it, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a couple, but if somebody else wants to ask before I do, because I know I've asked it to you already. Okay, these hopefully are just kind of quick answers. When you went over the definition, disability categories, I think I heard you say that this is just Minnesota definitions.
Mhm.
So these definitions will be different in other states.
Can be, but federal regulations define many of the definitions that are used commonly across all states.
That's what I had thought, so I was just wanting to clarify that. And then when you mentioned successes in expanding our services, I mentioned Lowell, Tonkin, and Lester Park. and you mentioned Lowell as setting 3. What were the other, for Condon and Leslie Park, was that the same reason?
Yeah, we've added a setting 3 program for students to be able to attend their home school. Rather than putting that program at Myers-Wilkins, that would end up with a 5th or 6th program. It makes absolutely no sense to keep growing sites that already have a number of programs. We have to look first and foremost at the home attendance area. But at Lowell, it's complicated. They've got a lot of kids, a lot of programs, and throughout much of the course of the year, we were thinking that we weren't going to be able to put a program there. But we were lucky in the end that we made the decision to support that, because that's Lowell students needing to go to Lowell.
Excellent, and we know that parents are more likely to be involved when the schools are closer to their homes, and all of that research out there. Third question, when you mentioned about the 5 speech positions, is it hard to hire qualified speech teachers?
Yes, we've been surprisingly successful. We've got some more applicants that just bid on a couple of our open jobs. I'm surprised that we were able to find as many. There's certain jobs, including nursing, it's hard to find. So certain categories, and I often say we have about 28, 29 unique licensure areas to recruit employees for in the Special Services Department. Nurses is the hardest one, actually.
Well, excellent, because that shows that people want to work for our district, so.
People
good
like
job.
to come to the lake, and our surrounding districts have more trouble hiring than we do, but Duluth Schools is very fortunate.
Excellent. And then did you say there's 450 employees
About in the Special Services Department.
Special services, okay. And then just let me see, I put little question marks. The last question, just again, you don't have to go in the weeds on this, but where you were talking about the federal Minnesota, the guidelines for staffing levels, how do we help educate parents on, you know, this is why the staffing levels are.
I can get you those. I can send you an email with that information. Would that be helpful?
That would be helpful as we get questions.
And there's certain things like birth to 2 teacher, it's 16 is the number. And the regulations highlight 16. We go over that a little bit, doing more story time here, but they could have a student on their caseload that they see once a month. They could have another student that they see 3 times a week. So that factors into how many students, even an early childhood who's recommended to be at 16, our people typically don't end up at 16, but more like 18 or 19. So anyway, lots of different implications than just what MDE expects in that paperwork. I will shoot you board members the MDE documents on caseload regulations.
And the last thing I just want to say is I too want to just lift up your department and both of you and the work you do. I work with kids, many kids who are on IEPs that come from a lot of different family situations, and I so appreciate the way you work with the kids I know about and the families, and how supportive you are to many different family situations. So it's a big thank you.
Appreciate that. Just one last reminder, IDEA regulations strive for students to be included in the general education classes. That's the richest learning environment possible. I work closely with teachers like Ms. Lofald that would ask some great questions about my most severe kids that would be in 9th grade English, and it's a healthy, cooperative working relationship throughout our district. We're a well-supported department.
And do we still do teaming? Like I teamed with the special education teacher for like 11, 12 years.
We do. We've scaled it back to just reading and math though. So English and math, where for example, I team taught in foods. That was a wonderful experience, but we had to scale back.
Yeah. And then just my question kind of tails off of Rosie or Member Locklear Kemp is are we going to secure special education teachers? I know you're hiring well and you've still got openings. Special education is one of those areas that all schools across the state and the nation are struggling to find qualified candidates. Again, we need to be at job fairs, and I know we are.
We're still finding people.
I keep hearing things like people like to come to Minnesota, they're looking at Duluth, we have a great benefits package. I just heard that again last week, that people are looking to come to us that are in other districts because our benefits really make us attractive, so I want to say that.
I'll speak a little bit to that, you know, our pages of unfilled positions for certified is really, if it's on one page and it's like this many. So, and I was telling Mr. Bonds today, and I'm kind of glowing because we have had some wonderful days the past weeks of interviewing. We've been interviewing candidates, and I'm so impressed with the quality of candidates that we're drawing. We had a teacher come today or actually a paraprofessional with an immense amount of experience, 1 semester short of her teaching certification, so we're going to work on her. But she's coming from Sioux Falls and wants to get out of Sioux Falls, coming here for family reasons. And that's the kind of candidate we're drawing for our paraprofessional positions. And wow, does that set our classrooms up for success. Another area that I'm seeing candidates come to us are people that either went to school and left and coming back now, or some of our former students are coming back, and they did, like the one we just, before today, did her student teaching at East High School. And wasn't sure she wanted to be a teacher, went out and worked in some residential care and has a heart and a passion for that, and she's going to be a great addition to our team. So I am not discouraged at all about our openings, our vacancies, because we continue to draw quality candidates. And that, I think, is what a change from what we've seen the last 2 years. I was in a different state, and we were trying to find candidates, and I was praying for candidates, and I've just been overwhelmed at the quality of candidates we're receiving now.
Member Sandholm, I know your hand was up.
I think we should end on that. Ask that question. I could ask you later too. It was just about the UFly science teaching meeting. Will we able to pilot that this past year? It's something we're implementing it next year, right?
So it's one of those phenomena that if a teacher comes to us and has a passion for a certain curriculum, maybe they're comfortable with it or they were trained in it, and there are some programs out there that are pretty expensive to train, so those teachers are pretty vested in. They will sneak it into their classroom and use it, pull it off the shelves and use it when nobody's looking. And that's not just in special education, that's across the board, right? We've known it, and for those who've been teachers, we maybe are guilty of the same thing. So to the UFly, we had some teachers that were using it, both in general education and in special education. And they had become familiar with it through their letters training. So it's a separate training, but they were familiar with it from that training. And so they were already passionate about it. It's relatively inexpensive to purchase. A lot of it's online. So I was excited about that because I wasn't relishing going forward to the team and saying we want to spend a bunch of money to get a new curriculum. But just really, I think my takeaway from all of that was their passion for it. And they are already using it, and because they were using it, and the immediate success they're seeing with it generated an enthusiasm that general ed teachers went to the principals and said, hey, we want this too. And so it became something that is being used pretty widely. And that's why, to what Mr. Magus and Mr. Bond said, it is a consideration as we go forward as part of our reading focus, our literacy focus. I think it'll be a tool that we will use across the schools and not just in our special education classrooms.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you. As superintendent, I'm very proud of the work that's being done. I think this is really great. Not just as superintendent, but I started in education as a special education paraprofessional myself, and I also have a son who was served through special education. And I just want to say that I'm very, very impressed with the work that the department is doing, and all of the teachers, all the staff. Kudos to you. Thank you. This was very good.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Well, clear some chairs for the next group.
Yes.
And if anybody needs to just, grab some M&Ms, stand up and stretch for just a minute, or...
We're going to transition to the next presentation.
we can.
And I'm going to turn over quickly to Superintendent Magus, who's going to do some introductions and kick us off. Superintendent Magus.
Sure. And I'll wait just one minute.
Superintendent Magus is every time.
I can't compete with M&Ms.
I'll take that. What? Which one do you want? You want one of these? No, I want
You're all eating. I'm so glad.
Thank you. And feel free, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Like a Jen, for your bike ride back.
So we have a very, very important topic tonight related to our financial status and the future of our finances. And in some ways, in talking with a number of different board members during board meetings, but also during some of our one-on-one sessions, I know there's definitely a feeling of feeling a little bit rushed, like why this is coming so quickly. But I want to remind folks of kind of the timeline of where we've been as of late. These are in the folders, I believe.
They're already in the folders.
Yeah,
So we've got copies.
Just was worried that it.
Oh, I appreciate it very, very much. But just a reminder that we were waiting to see what the state was going to do because we knew that there was a lot of money coming through the biennium budget process. And it was actually late in the evening on May 22nd, not too long ago, that the biennium budget was passed. So with that biennium budget being passed, we knew at that point that there was a lot of money coming forward, but there were also quite a few stipulations as far as how that money was going to be spent. When we think about the unemployment insurance, and we think about family medical leave, and a number of things that were important for enhancing education for our staff and for our students, that those were things that the money was tied to. So we realized at that point that the funding that was coming forward was going to be somewhat more restricted than we originally thought it might be. So on June 15th, we had Baird come to present on future finance, and during that presentation, that we considered the current situation. We looked at our financial status. We also talked about potential of a referendum or an operational levy, or a refinancing of our debt, or some combination of those things. And at that point, the board made it clear that they wanted us to have consideration of some possible questions for what could come forward as far as an operational levy, referendum, or budget refinancing. And so with that, that's what we'll be focusing on today is that presentation. But I just want to, as we go into it, kind of set the stage for where we're going to be at. That basically, we've just put together a really deep, comprehensive strategic roadmap with the community that focuses on our desired daily experiences and what they're asking for. And so much of what we've been able to do these past couple of years with ESSER funding and other things is be able to provide more counselors, more MTSS specialists, a greater focus on our curriculum. And we've also talked about the impending ESSER cliff that was coming forward when that ESSER money ran out. And so we're coming to the end of that ESSER spending, and that cliff is looming near us. And if we're thinking about those desired daily experiences and what we want to do for the three areas, supporting every student, advancing equity, and improving systems, we need to think about what we're going to do financially. Also, with our ESSER funding, we were able to move into the 21st century for learning with technology. We went from having a technology budget of $250,000 per year, which is a shoestring, it barely keeps the lights on, to being able to have devices for each of our students. And so as we think about what this might mean if we're able to move forward with questions, would be being able to maintain those devices and the staff and everything to support that. It would also mean that we could, because the budget for technology would be offset, that we'd be able to finance some of the other things that we're doing through ESSER, like our MTSS positions and guidance counselors and interventionists, that we'd be able to better support those positions, because we all know that we're going to spend more than $250,000 a year on technology. So it allows us, by offsetting that technology need, to think about how that spending can go into other areas. So without moving forward, we would have some pretty challenging situations. We would be looking at, right now we have 37 positions, full and part-time, that are funded through ESSER still. And at least 24 of those full and part-time positions would be reduced at the end of the year. So a lot of people would probably go into other positions, so I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a reduction in force, because through attrition, some of those things could happen. But also, we really need about $4 million a year for technology. So that's something that we really need to focus on. And so Also within what we're thinking about our programming. We know that we have the new elementary schedule moving forward through work that was done through labor management. We're very proud of that. That's taking place in the coming year. But we also are doing work with the middle school, looking at new middle school model and thinking about how we can re-envision how we educate our students in the middle years. And staff just came back from a conference and they're super excited about it. We do have some funding for that. But we also know that the high school, when we hear about the need for 7-period day, when we look at our graduation rates, mathematically, we're doing kids a disservice in not giving them more opportunities to try and sometimes struggle and maybe fail class, but then have opportunity to make it up because they have those extra periods. If we aren't moving forward with one of the question scenarios today, we would still be able to fund the middle school programming, but we wouldn't have the money set for that next phase, which would be high school programming. And so that's a concern for us as well. And I'll share this with you through my board update as well. But those are some of the main things that we're looking for. So we're looking for what is the best way to have a modest increase in taxes that would fund what we need to do for our students. I was thinking about, like, what does this mean for us? And I believe that we have very good schools in Duluth, but this will help us take it to that next level of being great schools in Duluth and being able to fund the things that we need to do. So along with that, you have worked as a board very, very hard for the past 4 or 5 years on getting our financial house in order. When you think about what we've done, we went from being near statutory operating debt, having a few $100,000 in our general fund, to having a solid, respectable fund balance that keeps a decent safety net there in case of emergency. And we also worked on reducing our financial footprint by selling the historical Central High School and getting out of that nearly $50 million in deferred maintenance, and really thinking about that new investment into our properties. We've also looked at, with them, we went from $50 million worth of needs in that old building to a new facility for $32 million, saving roughly $20 million for the district there. We're also, as has been seen in the public, we're looking at further getting our financial house in order by selling properties that we are no longer really in need of, like the transportation area, and also looking at Garfield, and looking at combining into perhaps a new building that would allow us to further reduce taxes by reducing our lease levy authority. So you have worked hard, and we have worked hard to put the financial house in order, so I feel like it's a respectable ask to consider where we're at and consider what those possible questions might be. And so we have tonight Michael Hoheisel and Matt Rantapon from Baird, who you've known and worked with before. They'll be sharing information on those potential scenarios.
Is it all right to put our back to you?
Oh, you're good.
We'll sit today, so you don't have to stare up. Good afternoon.
Nice to see you.
We got the pleasure of watching 4 or 5 aircraft go around a half hour before we walked in, so that was pretty neat experience. You have a packet of information in front of you, and it is not our intent at this moment to go through every specific slide today, because we've had 2 presentations in the last 4 or 5 months. But if you need to bring us back to a slide or have a question, we will be more than happy to bring you back. And who's following the bouncing ball behind us?
I got it.
Awesome. All right, so if you would take us directly to slide 2.
Is slide 2 the
Slide 2 is
one
page
the
2
cover?
also, yes.
Yeah, slide 1 would be the cover. So slide 2, as you'll notice, on June 15th, we focused on additional funding of about $5.9 million annually. After that meeting, Simone went through the budget with a fine-tooth comb, identified about $2 million of technology expenditures that were included in that $5.9 million figure. So the intent of the presentation tonight is to move that $5.9 million up to $7.9 million. As Mike mentioned, many of those slides are similar format to what we shared on June 15th. Hence the reason we're going to try to consolidate and move through to the summary slide, which contains each of the scenarios. So if we can move to slide 4, please.
And while you move to slide 4, Assistant Superintendent Bonds was instrumental in, the whole team really was, going back and forth and saying, okay, I see these 5 years, do you have this, do you have this? So we had a pretty great discussion with your administrative team and went back and said, okay, to run the model, are we covering this, are we covering this, have we thought about this? So that your whole team was involved in that. As Simone said, boy, after listening to this discussion, I want to go back and relook at that to make sure that over the course of the next 5 years of projections that we have that in there. We can look at you, the board, and say, we have one chance at this and we want to make sure that what we're projecting is in there.
Can I just ask a clarification? On the previous page, when you're talking about focus on generating 5.9, that's thinking about projecting out to about 2026 when we're going to be in a deficit. Is that correct?
That 5.9 million a year was saying, taking a look at the deficit spending in year 2 through 5.
Okay.
The average of that was 5.9.
5.9, okay.
And we wanted to add an additional $2 million to that number per year to cover technology.
So the 5.9 is the forecasting out the budget deficit, and then we're adding 2 million on top of that.
Yeah, and I'd like to clarify, I had 2 million in there, I went and added 2 more million to that. So we have 4 million now for technology. It
Just wanna
was
make sure I
there,
have the
but we
numbers.
decided that our needs were going to be greater, so we increased it.
Okay, perfect.
If you put it in a big picture sense, if you just quickly say to the common person, we're dedicating about $500 of technology towards each butts and seat in your school district.
Okay.
Is the quickest way to say, because somebody might say, well, you know, if I had to provide that for my child, what would I be spending? They might be spending anywhere from $350 to $1,200 for their personal computer. And we can offer that as a district. Now, obviously, that is really simplistic because $500 you're looking at a device. When you're saying that, that isn't what the school district's giving. The school district is giving the instructional program, the backbone to provide that data, to keep it running. I mean, there's a whole lot more that go into that, but thought it might be helpful to, you know, oh, I can see spending or dedicating that amount of dollars out of our revenue that we receive for a student. So that's how we kind of look at it when you're communicating beyond this room.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a clarification, as you go through the slides, there's a number on ours, so they're gonna correlate with.
Correct.
So
The number on the lower right,
It's a number on our page.
I'm not going to promise that every slide has a number, but it was there at one point in time.
Okay.
It's supposed to be there. We watched that pretty closely. So I'll take slide number 8. You take slide number 4, Matt.
Okay, slide 4, folks, is just a reminder of the existing certificate of participation debt that you make the payments annually out of your general fund. Where you can see, right now we're in taxes payable 23, where you're covering about 2.6 million of those payments out of general fund. The drop that you see from 18 to 19 was a result of the refunding or restructuring of those certificates back in 2018, 2019.
So tell me what the blue and the red.
Those are the
blue
two
and
series of borrowings associated with this COP.
Okay.
So the yellow was the oldest certificate, and the blue is the newest certificate, so to speak. So then moving forward all the way to slide 8. And you will see the bars represent the total amount of debt that is applied to your specific taxpayer, the levy. And the numbers on the bottom reflect taxes payable year, So we, of course, are in, you're now, have already gone through the first half collections of 2023. So you are at that 26,930,000 at the top of that bar. What we are envisioning when we talk about structuring a finance is to say, look, if we ask the voters to restructure slide 4, if we fit it in on top of the already debt, capped at the black dashed line, we can, under that structured finance, take out that 22 million and completely pay it off by taxes payable 2029. So when that dash line goes down to taxes payable 30. So we completely take out that 22 million. So what you would be asking the taxpayers to forego is a drop of debt for 2 years, a drop of debt that's occurring after taxes payable 27. So that's what we mean by a structured savings.
And that the refunding basically takes that 2.6 million that you're paying annually out of general fund of the COPs and converts it to a debt levy where you're freeing up that 2.6 million in the general fund that can be used for other instructional needs.
And that would happen by restructuring our debt. We capture it that way, right?
Correct. So you have the ability, when we get to the
For those 2 years.
right, we have the ability to structure it however you want, but paying it off quickly, and with the higher interest rate environment, paying it off quickly, it seems to be the most prudent use of those dollars. I know that as a district, in behind the scenes, you are always examining what you're doing in teaching and learning. You're currently in a process of examining your facilities and having updates to potential needs down the road. So that will be, I believe, I don't want to be spilling the beans, but I believe that will be coming to you or to the administration in some packaging form in the next several months. So that identifying where you, just doing a whole large look at facility by facility and assessment. So not knowing what's coming down the pike on that, we still think that layering in that gap, leaving a $6-7 million gap so that if something needed to be layered in more than that with building needs, it could, but at least saying, hey, allow us to do this and still provide, we still hope to be able to provide the taxpayers some type of relief is the ultimate goal of that component structuring. So with that, we're going to pop to the very next page, slide 9.
So just to go back for a second, if, just thinking about the layperson on the street, if somebody said, what is it that you're doing? How would you explain it in very simple terms? Because it is very complex.
I would say that in a quick hitting one-to-one conversation, our goal is to raise revenue. Our goal is to raise revenue while being cognizant of the efficiency of which we are allowed to layer in taxes to you, the taxpayer. So what I just said is, we want a revenue raise, but we are very cognizant of that ask. And we're not taking it lightly. We don't want to increase taxes frivolously. So, in essence, what we would be doing with this revenue raise is we're already paying for some of this in the budget. We want to free that budget up so that we can take care of those things part of those things that you were just talking about. I'm not good with the MTS. Is it MTT? How many T's and how many S's?
1 T, 3 and 2 S's.
1 T, 2 S's, I like that. Counselors, interventionists,
those things, when you have as many facilities as Duluth Public Schools, and you have those per building, those items add up. That 2.3 million can be freed up in your operational budget, could be used for that. We have the elementary change, we have the middle school change, and we have the revamping of the high school. So it's component pieces of a revenue raise that can be used, targeted specifically, that you can say, here's how we think we want to use these 7 pieces of our money with this request.
So does that revenue raise follow the dotted line, LGO/FTCOP? But then the payoff for the taxpayer comes in 2028, 2029, or 2030?
Correct.
So then how do you explain what I just said? Because you said no to what I...
Yeah,
So you explain.
so if you can go back to slide 8. You would free up 2.3 million of the request in perpetuity by hitting the dash line. The difference between...
We're staying where we're at right now.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And then the one that would be the extended effort would be if you ask for, let's just call it 8 million. 8 million less than 2.3. So 4.7 is, do math, 5.7? 5.7? The 5.7 would be a raise. That's the level of tax effort you'd have to raise going forward. That's not shown in this particular graph. The part that's shown is the wiping out slide 4. Great question. So when looking at slides 4, 6, 8, going through all our options, we went back administratively over the last 2 weeks, and we tried to compartmentalize this and saying, of course, asking one question is, if you were to pursue a revenue raise through a fall election, asking one question is the easiest. So if we were to frame that in a question, it could be framed in an operating levy, which is your first column of tax numbers on slide page. Sorry. You're doing a wonderful job. So operating levy is the voter-approved operating levy. You will notice that every $150,000 value, so the $150,000 homestead residential impact is $119, $150,000 commercial industrial is $150,000, is at $119.10, and the $150,000 apartments $119.10. All properties are created equal under the voter-approved operating levy. So each valuation, whatever you're assessed, if you have the same assessment, it's the same tax income. That has the widest use availability money-wise that you, statutorily, it's a general fund dollar. It's the widest use. If we went to a capital projects levy only, and saying you're going to spend that money for $4 million of technology, and the remainder, getting up to that $5+ million, would be spent on salaries and benefits for those within the schools are providing technology services. Then you could ask that whole question under capital project levy, and you can see that $119.10 for homestead residential goes down to $88.58. If you were to look at that commercial industrial, you're not going to see $88.58 down below. We are on a class, Minnesota net tax capacity rates are on a class rate system. The class rates almost double from a home versus a commercial industrial. So your apartments are slightly lower than your commercial industrial, your homestead. So there's pieces in this that are ebbing and flowing as you work away. If you were to do the least amount of impact on the most amount of people on this 6-column chart, you would go all the way to the right, and you would say, look, folks, we are looking to do two things to raise revenue. We're looking to restructure some old general fund certificates of participation as one question, and pass it over to a board approved category where it's on the levy, where right now we're just paying it from the general fund dollars we get from the state. And second piece would be to ask for a technology component. That $119 we started in the upper left-hand corner drops to $64 in the right side for a homestead residential, and it saves about $4 less for commercial industrial than the first column. So the $150,000 commercial industrial goes from 119 to 115, and you'll see the apartments went from 119 to 95. And keep in mind, when we assist you with the referendum, if you were to move forward, we would provide you with a parcel-specific tax calculator. So these are just figures picked out. We know that you're between $150,000 and $200,000 average assessed value for a homestead residential property in Duluth. We know that across the state, we've had anywhere from 15% to 40% increases in assessed value. And so we don't want to be guessing. We do a parcel specific so that anybody can come in and look at it, or they call the district sends us an email or calls us and says, can you help this person, can you get back? Absolutely, and our email addresses are on the bottom of the tax calculator where they reach out directly.
Member Sadowski.
Yeah, well, I think the parcel-specific option is a good one. That would be helpful to answer people. I was just wondering if there was a graph on here that it would be helpful for us to see, I think, what is it now? You know, what would the taxes look like right now for someone who owns a residential homestead for $150,000 or, you know?
And we
it'd be interesting to see that in conjunction.
That was in October, November's presentation.
Okay, I can go back to.
No, Matt will pull up 150,000, what the effort was.
So while he's doing that, is there another question there?
I'd say while you're doing that, like looking at a $200,000 home in Duluth, you know, if the annual tax rate is $92.55, that would be asking the taxpayers for $1.77 per week. So that is something, but it's when you look at the impact of what it'll have on the schools, I think $1.77 per week is very good value for what it would bring to the system.
And that $150,000 homestead residential property this year in '23 pays about $540 in school portion of taxes.
So $540 for the $150,000, and for a $200,000 man?
It'd be about $754.
And then I think we have a commercial industrial
valued at $500,000.
We don't have that on here.
Also,
300 is.
sorry, $250,000 would have been about $1,500 in school portion of tax.
That's confusing. I'm not following that.
So that school, so if you took a home at $200,000 and you looked at their tax statement, you went down to line, it's either 8A and B or 9A and B, and you added the two categoricals of voter approved and other under school portion of taxes, that school portion of your tax statement on a $200,000 house was $754. That's how much in total they paid for their school portion of taxes. So we would be saying that with this ask on the far right, that $754 would change by an additional $92 if we kept everything the same from the previous year. Does that help?
And if we took that $754 this year and went back to taxes payable 19 the first year the operating levy was added, that $754 was about $924 annually. So it moved from $924 to $754, assuming that $200,000 home stayed at $200,000 over that 4-year period.
we all know that those assessments have changed about 4% a year. So, but, once again, we need somewhere to start on the data.
Did that answer your question, Member Sadowski?
Yeah, it did.
So then, if we go to,
But before you go to, so the next time we revisit this, or even now, because housing is higher, I think we have more homes, estimated over 300,000 within the Duluth market. So it would behoove us to have some numbers on what that projected capital project levy and every category, because I know they can get into the calculator and do it themselves on what their house.
the static sheet, so I would envision you'll have a special referendum spot on your website. The static sheet would probably be 6 to 7 values of each of these categories on your static sheet, running from, probably starting with 100,000 and running up to $1 million on the static sheet. Just absolutely.
Member LaFleur.
I guess just back to Member Sadowski's question then, and again, this is a little bit further down, but that is what we're going to have to answer to the voters is, this is what, paid now, this is what the increase will be.
And in any information campaign, if we get stuck on how much is a revenue raise and what the taxes, what it's going to cost me, if we get stuck there, we're going to not be successful. The piece that's going to be the success is if we're going to generate pretty close to $8 million, here are the things that, what are you going to get for the use of those taxes, and then come back to what will it cost. Oh, we're getting all that for that? You don't get that very much, but we do have certain individuals across the state of Minnesota, and I've seen it more and more, especially when it comes to schools, because they noticed what they were missing during COVID and the hub of activity and what your schools are kind of the center of the communities across the state. And where we're seeing that is, well, that's a great investment. I can get that for our kids or our community for that amount of money. I think that's a good use of my money. And we're hearing that more and more across the state, which is very interesting because with politics being as the polarity of the politics that are out there right now, it's pretty refreshing that schools are being kind of the middle ground and people are coming together and supporting them.
Mr. Lawson.
Yep, thank you for that, and thank you for your question, Member LaFleur. I do think we'll get some of those questions about what, these are what my taxes are, this is what they're going to be, but I think to your point too, making sure that our messaging is super clear, crystal clear on what it's getting our students. It's really not a lot to give for all that they're going to give. But I wanted to go back to slide 8, page 8, the debt levy side of the budget. I thought I understood this before coming to this meeting, but then after, now I'm confused. So if I were to, explain this, like Superintendent Mays asked, just to the common person, how would you, is this a refinancing of our debt?
No.
Is that what this is? No.
We would refinance. You have an operational side of your budget, you have a facility side of your budget. Part of your operational budget is paying for a component of facilities. So what we'd be asking the voters to say is, take that old facilities debt and move it over to facilities. So if they move it to facilities, it would then get on slide 8. That move would say, hey, we have about $27.4 million worth of, our mortgage is $27.4 million through 2027. That mortgage will drop to $7.5 million. If we only drop it to $20 million for those 2 years, we can pay off that old facility debt that's hampering the freedom of our operating funds.
Sure. Thanks.
And that's the selling point, if we can come up with a simple way to explain it.
Explain it, yeah.
Then
That's what we need to
That's
get
the
to.
we will need to work on that as we have more people back at the office that, okay, folks, here's how I started. Now, I've been doing this 32 years, 33 years. Okay, young man, I'll write it. Now you take it and say, what would your mother and father say that are not in the schools? Run this by your sister at college. What do they say? What's coming through?
And one of the things we talked about, was this yesterday? I forget now, we have a lot of meetings. Is the goal of making sure we have strategic communication, or making sure that we, partner with someone who can really help us and really explain this in an accessible way to our community. Because you're spot on, there's going to be lots of questions, and we need to make sure our message is really clear and inspiring, and again, accessible for our community members.
Clear, concise, understandable, and repeatable, because I've already seen your guys' body language on the third presentation, and I've got a really good feeling that you're starting to understand some pretty complicated components of your budget.
Superintendent Magnus?
So I think in that messaging and having listened to the board and your feedback, you talked about how, I had mentioned, working some with Jeff Anderson, who's done a lot of work for us when we've been through these processes of selling historical Central and Central on the Hill and things like that. And also, Member Waffle Kemp brought up the collective understanding that you all have. It'd be great if there was opportunity for us to be able to share that as we gather, as we hear things, to be able to have a way for us to be able to receive that information so that we can tell that story. Of course, not just through Jeff Anderson, because you have a team of people that really specialize deeply in crafting that messaging of
And not only in education, but in other venues that are out in communities. And so they have the ability, just as Matt could say, they will say, Michael, I don't want it in finance speak. Tell me what it is in finance. Okay, here's what I just heard. Here are the 4 lines we need to use, and what do you think of that? We rewrite it, we go back and forth, and then we're, because our goal is to provide you a venue where you're having a consistent message. You've got a one-pager that you could have in your back pocket at all times to say, oh, well, oh yeah, I'm glad you asked that. And when you say it, and you say it, and you say it, and now all of a sudden it's been presented as part of coming back to schools, and now your faculty's saying it, maybe your bus drivers, maybe your food service personnel, maybe your businessmen, they're all saying it in somewhat same form. It really resonates across your community.
I would also say that this will be one of the major lifts for us for the next several months. This would have to be critical work that we dedicate time to make sure that this happens. As an administration and as we work with the community and as we work with the board, part of the question is, should we wait? Right, that's a question that we've pondered. Should we wait till April so we have more time to do this? And I talked about the state, how everything has come to fruition in the past few weeks. If we wait and if we don't do it in November, we won't receive the money until the following year. And so this is our last opportunity to kind of avoid that year of ESSER cliff. We'd have money down the road, which would be great, but we would have a pretty major course correction, and then we would level out with the money from the referendum. So that's part of our sense of urgency about moving more quickly, but at the same time, like you said, Michael, you speak you're deeply fluent in finance speak, right? But when we want to know what the message is, we want to make sure that it's it's put through that process and being able to have a crafted message.
You will hear both of us say it more often than not, we cannot let the financial tail wag the dog. Meaning the tax impact is the tail, but it's what you're getting out of the bang for the buck for the revenue raised is what's going to make or break this referendum. If people in your school district, in these four walls, are feeling confident that this is the right ask, then getting that message on the community is it's gonna go a while. It's gonna be a piece of cake. And nothing is ever easy when you go to election, because this is the only thing they can vote on. But Superintendent Magnus is absolutely correct, is we're still cognizant of you are leadership here, and this is one option to go in November, and we know all this is fitting in the budget. But if that feels like we are going too fast, then we expect you to communicate to us to say, okay, we will regroup, we will come back with some ask or reevaluate everything we evaluated the last 18 months. We may be coming back with more of a request just one short year, because you're now skipping a fiscal year, and depending on what you decide to do with fiscal cliff year, are you going to sell hope to your personnel, or are you going to make the necessary adjustments and say that we're not going to deficit spend? So based on those assumptions, we would come back with a different package. But so no, we don't. We want you to feel comfortable, because you're the leaders. You're the ones that are going to have to answer out of the community. You're the ones that are going to get. Hopefully, you're the ones that are going to get the tough questions beyond administration. And so, and we talk about April under the assumption that you would be doing the far right category. If you did the far left category, we have to be talking about November election joined up with a presidential race. Because an operating levy can only be done unless you're an SOD, which we don't think you're going to have a shot at this year. We don't want you to drop 20% fund balance. With that, operating levies can only be held on a general fund date once a calendar year, and could general election date, and can only be, or if you did a mail ballot, then we got to go ask MDE to allow us to do it in August or April or May. So, if you wanted to look at the questions and how they're, if you thought my answer was complicated on how to see it, then you can really see why. You can see why when we review the questions. So on slide 11. You're very familiar with this ask. It just says how much money are we gonna raise for people, and this one takes it a step further and says, well, we know that we have the opportunity once to raise revenue or replace the revenue that the voters approved with school board authority now. But you're way before that time. So what we thought is we would re-up this new ask for 10 years and reset the clock. So this question resets. Yep, this question says,
what year are we in? We are in a levy year now of what, maybe year 4?
4.
Okay, so this question, or one of our questions would be, we want to sunset that and really bring forward this new one for 10 years.
Correct. We want to start the clock ticking again in taxes payable 24. So you said taxes payable 19 to us, man.
Yeah.
Was the first year of election, because it was a November 18 ballot. So technically, I guess we'd be in year 5, but yeah. 4 or 5. Right now, as we sit, we're in year 4. So with that, this particular way of asking the question says, we don't want to keep coming back to the voters. This is, we want to take what we have, we want to keep what we have, we want to add new and make it good for the next 10 years for us. and let us know if you want to do.
Do we have to put the numbers of 646 to 1552? Because that looks like such a huge ask that somebody's gonna say like, whoa, what? That's gonna cost me a whole lot more because of what I think I'm doing right now, so
Correct, it did.
what if we don't sunset this?
Then you would just be asking for the new portion of the authorization. So the difference between the 646 and
And the 15.
the 1552.
But then we'd have to come back in 10 years from that 2018 for that 654 and ask for,
Correct.
and the legislators now said we could do that one
You
time
could, assuming that law's in place, you'd have the ability to reset it by school board approval.
in 2029.
Correct, so when,
And then the second one, we could do in 2024 or 2034 type of thing. I kind of like that idea.
and that is easy to.
Yeah,
But once again, that's on the far
So,
left, that's a
yeah.
little more,
well, wouldn't we be able to
you're able
ask
to
for
read.
that increase of that difference between 600 something to the 15 as an add-on to our current levy, and we're going to use it. Then the second question is, we're going to use this in technology, and it's going to bring us this $8 million or $4 million that we need for technology. That's question 2. So all we're saying is we're asking for a bump in a current levy, and that bump is going to buy us.
The bump is gonna provide you let's say for simple, $8 million new of revenue. The $900 difference between these two numbers is gonna generate you that close to $8 million in revenue to fund those 5 to 8, 9 bullet points that you're doing across your school budget with this money. That would be one question, and it would be you're right, we could ask for the $906, whatever it is.
$905.99 to be exact is what generates the revenue.
So that could be one way to do this question.
Right.
But that isn't like I said, that's far left side.
So that,
Well,
when you say far left, it says far left, that's on.
I know.
Right, I know.
We're gonna slide
I
back.
don't know why that has to be the far left. Why does that have to be the far left if the far right is the one question because we have to ask 2 questions?
No, you could only ask one question.
Going back to slide 9,
I gotcha. So this is
that'd be
It's more burden
Mike's
on
referring to the far
the
left
versus
impact of the 11910
That's, yes,
on the
it is a little bit
150,000.
okay.
But really, what creates the least
So
amount
we
of
wouldn't be
burden
asking that one
is slide
anyway.
14.
I got it.
Yeah, so
Okay.
let me take a different approach on it.
Yeah.
Slide 11 lines up with, stay on your grid, please. Slide 11 lines up with operating levy only column.
I gotcha. Okay.
Slide 12 lines up with capital project levy only.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
that just, you haven't seen that type of question, so let me go to slide 12. So slide 11 says, how much will we pick up per kid? Slide 12, the capital projects levy says, we want to generate $7.9 million of money per year. That is a tax rate of 7.014%. Once that's passed, Duluth Public Schools gets 7% of the tax base to be able to fund technology in the next 10 years. Tax base goes down, Duluth Schools gets less than $7 million. Tax base increases, Duluth School gets more than $7 million. So it's got a built-in inflation factor that's a real inflation factor versus the 2 to 3% that you'll get through the CPI. It's whole price index. So, sorry, slide 9. Slide 9 then is capital projects levy, or the second column of tax impact numbers, and then we go to, I'd prefer to go to slide 14. Slide 14 then slides you all the way on the matrix to far right.
So that far right of the least amount of impact.
I don't know.
So that slide 14 is very small, but the left side question is will you allow us to refinance the operational COP that was used for facilities of 21.8 million, and on the right side, it takes that 7% rate, drops it down to 4.687. And as Simone pointed out to us, I really like 5.2 million on that question better than 7.9 on the previous single question.
But I think it would be helpful if we look at all of these as separate questions, because I think that was confusing for me at first, and you've taught me so much, both of you. So there's basically 4 questions, okay, right? So-
There's there's many combinations of,
Yeah.
should I say permutations?
Yes, so that was helpful for me as I broke them out separately, and we can combine. So this is, to me, is question 3 is on the left, question 4 is on the right. And we can combine those with the 2 first questions. We can pick question number 4 and combine it with question number 2. That would be refunding our bond and then also asking for a technology replacement.
So how Simone was processing it was operating levy question is 1. Capital projects levy is a second question. A level bond restructuring is the 3rd question, and a 4th question is a structured bond.
That's how I had to figure it out.
But there won't be 4 questions on the
No.
November.
Right, out of
Four
those,
choices.
what Simone is saying is, out of those 4 choices, we can have a question 1 and 2 of those 4 to pick and choose to ask to raise revenue the way you want to do it, and we'll pop out the tax impact associated with that in that matrix.
We're currently thinking that slide 14.
Slide 14 is the least amount of impact on your homeowner taxpayers, but it also, if you compare the operating levy to the 2 questions, it's also a little bit less on commercial, industrial, and homestead.
Can't we really just say we're going out to the community for this levy because we want technology? Bottom line, that's what we want.
That would be lovely, wouldn't it?
Oh, why can't we? That's what we're asking for, right?
Because the state makes us put it in these darn questions.
Well, I know, but if
and
somebody stops me on the street, I'm saying,
Yes,
you're gonna
you
have a chance to vote this November, and really all we're asking for is a little bit of restructure debt, and I can understand that because I restructured debt my whole life, for my housing and my credit cards, and so, but bottom line to my neighbors in my community, I'm gonna say, we need technology, and our general fund right now can't support it because we want to keep our social workers, our counselors, our special education growth, and improve all of our academic outcomes. But technology is just really an expense we cannot do right now, so that's what we're doing.
You're 100%
yes.
spot on, and I heard it's recording, and we're gonna use some of that. Because that's an excellent way to look at it.
And I think that's the dog, when he said, you can't live, this is the tail, and we don't want the tail wagging the dog. The dog that we're valuing is that we're keeping the kids in the 21st century with their learning, with the devices that we've been able to get. We're
even gonna get better devices, aren't we? I mean, because I would imagine these Chromebooks we gave to them 2 years ago need replacement.
Right.
And they need upgrades, and they need repair costs.
You may
They
be
need to
purchasing stuff with this money that hasn't been discovered yet.
Right.
Within the next 10 years. But it provides a revenue stream where this revenue stream that we're providing isn't a revenue for just year 1. So so that the next generation is limping along. This is providing revenue.
Is this $8 million a year?
This is $8 million a year.
For 10 years? I'd like
But it's covering $4 million in technology.
$4 million in
I started saying something like
curriculum.
$2 million for middle school curriculum, $500,000 for elementary curriculum specialists, and the high school change.
We want to go to a lot more digital learning, and train our teachers to continue to do that, right? No?
And we
Blended
need a
learning.
7-period day.
Yes, and that's the other big part is we want to be able to have a 7-period day for our high school. This will allow us to do that. I also think that there are certain things with.
But is that coming out of our general fund because we don't have to use it in technology? Or is that part of
That
that?
would be part of
Part of
this.
this.
And also, we also hear some things in the community about different projects that people want us to focus on. They have a technology element. You think about expensive sound systems and things like that, that potentially part of that could come out of this as well. So as we're crafting our message and thinking about
But on the ballot, will it say technology and instructional and maintenance and purchase?
I don't think so. I think those are.
In the second, so the far right question, it has, will provide funds for acquisition, installation, replacement, support, and maintenance of software licensed computers, on and on. Once again, we're the tail of the dog. That's the head of the dog up on the screen, is how the ballot questions have to be written. This gives you, the way this ballot question is written, has been written in, I think there's 64 districts, 60 districts with capital project levies. And that's what we've arrived since it's been available to us to ask these questions. So this actually was back when I first started, back as I went behind the ears when my father was superintendent for 25 years and asking questions. It was called the down payment levy. The down payment levy was the levy you asked for to say, hey, we know interest rates are high, let us collect the next 3 years of payments and then reduce the ask in the fourth year when we go out and borrow these funds and ask the voters to approve that, to get a jump on school building.
So we would want to have significant messaging around what the ask is and get the get out the vote campaign, but there would also be a campaign in support of voting yes. And so if people vote, we would be encouraging people to come into the ballot box and vote yes. And the messaging of all the advertising and all the door knocking and everything else we would do would be what would allow people when they enter into that voter booth to say, I'm voting yes because I know that it's going to mean a great high school schedule for my kids. It's going to mean keeping counselors. It's going to mean keeping devices. And so they wouldn't necessarily need to get into as much of the technicality of the wording of this.
Absolutely.
And if we think that,
But once again, that we want to button that down to, if you're promising it, you're going to deliver.
and given the huge sea change we're going to see in technology over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, do we really want to take away the devices that our kids have? I mean, we go back to pencil and paper and have our kids not prepared.
Yeah.
I think this is really important.
I think where you get into I was at a public hearing with 100, this was the fourth public hearing of a town of, I think there's 1,500 voters in town, and they have had 450 people attend 4 separate meetings. And we get about 30 of the same people in each of these meetings. So they're really involved in moving forward with a new pre-K through 12 school building. A small community, and we got into quite the discussion on COVID and how teaching and what has shown in teaching, learning, and the social interaction that's so very, very important to a public school education and your community. And I was pretty interested in some of the points that a couple of the no people even chimed in and were very supportive of the schools and kind of leveled out the discussion last night, and kind of you could see they were wavering about, yeah, we started coming back to basketball, we started coming to football and volleyball, we started attending this, and that technology is not a fix in education. Technology is an enhancement. So you have to be careful how you talk about that, but I believe that what you have shown in Duluth public schools of, going from, what was it, 3,400 printouts weekly to where you are now, and how, well, if that wasn't working, I don't believe you'd see an uptick in enrollment within your schools when there is definitely less people making kids, so to speak. Or making kids later in life, so that we are seeing a definite decline in enrollment across statewide in Minnesota. Huge. And so, technology, it can be said simply, but make sure that when you're messaging, make sure that it's part and parcel to the social and mental well-being of what we're providing within the four walls of these schools. It's a part. We're not trying to replace personnel, we're not trying to replace this. It is real, it is part of it, and it's an important component to keep going.
Any other questions?
Would there only be one question on a ballot concerning this issue? Or is there going to be more?
If you want to see the most efficient tax impact, you would need to do 2 questions. If you want 1 question, we can do it within 1 question.
And in that lies the dilemma. That's, my gut tells me do better with 1 question. I just feel that way with the community and what's happened in the past. But you can't do, and really the benefit to the taxpayer long term, and the way we would want to do this to benefit the greater community is to do it in 2 questions, correct?
Correct.
And I don't know the answer to this, but the exact answer, but I believe in school districts around the state, we have seen the 2-question referendum be very successful in many school districts around the state, because question 1 helps explain question 2. And that's in our communicating to the public. That 1 question gets too complicated almost.
Correct, and you're not, we might have 3 questions on a ballot, and the 3rd question is we've got this user group and this user group, and they're both interested in, but they don't care about question 2. They definitely care about question 1, so question 3 is considered a throwaway question. We aren't giving you a throwaway question with just having 2 questions here, folks.
Is there any,
If you want to maintain this, if you want to move forward to Duluth excellence, these 2 questions are part and parcel, I think, based on what we see in funding for the next half decade to decade.
Slide 14 that we're on.
Yes.
That's the way to go.
And once again, to go full circle, you have, is the time this fall? If the time's the fall, is it 2 questions? If it's not this fall, then what do you want us to bring back? And then how do we bring that back with those different assumptions? And then this could all be put together in your packet for review, of course, at your 18th school board, regular school board meeting.
when we were considering the earlier change to the middle school day, and there was a lot of frustration on the part of teachers and others. Those of you who were in QSC and QLT might remember that there was a really impassioned plea from the teachers union to don't choose a mediocre choice for middle school, to give us some time to step back and build it right, and then be brave and go to the voters and ask for what we need. And that this is really part of it, and it's based partly on that we could have just jammed art in and took away the world language classes and everything like we were looking at, or what we did is we gave people the time to look at it, research it, and put together a better model. And so I believe that based on that, as well as the need that our teachers are seeing and staff are seeing, along with us, to serve the kids better through a 7-period day or a different type of iteration for high school, I believe that there's going to be really, and I've talked to people about it today, I believe that there's going to be significant support for this from our staff too. So what they want to know though too, and I think the public does, is if you bring us a question you dang well better follow through with what you say you're gonna do. Because if you don't, then, and I half jokingly, but half seriously said, you know, if we don't follow through with our promise on this, I believe that you should consider whether or not I should be superintendent, because I don't want to overpromise. We can't overpromise the public on this or overpromise the staff on this. We need to make sure that what we ask for is what we can actually deliver on.
But that's hard to know too in year 2, you know, so it passes and, you know, we're able to give some to technology, but then year 3 or 4 comes along and there is unforeseen, there's a new legislature, we don't have the trifecta, and we watch a lot of funding go away that we've had. Then all of a sudden, our question and the money we have gotten for it has to go to maintain what we have, which is really what happened in our last referendum.
Correct,
So
absolutely.
let's not, you know, leave that hanging out there. We hoped that we could use the referendum money from our last referendum to reduce class sizes. But then we also saw that enrollment slipped a bit, funding from our state, our special ed cross-subsidy rose for a few years with having to supply money. So we had to use the referendum money to maintain the teachers we had, which maintained class size. But if we wouldn't have had that referendum, we would have lost those teachers and our class sizes would have really escalated.
Very true.
So we were able to use the money to help our students succeed, to keep our district moving forward. And that message also can't be twisted by somebody that wants to write or complain or visit us. I mean, they can come and do that, and we can listen, but our messaging wants to be positive and only look at this year's thing. This is new administration and a committed budget that's better than it was 6 years ago.
And I did not mean to, I just want to reiterate, I did not mean to insinuate that that was not the intention. I just know that that's part of the public perception, and that's why I want to clarify that we will use this money for what we say we're going to use it.
And the beauty of these 2 questions is that you're not collecting this money, either one of these questions, on the number of pupil units.
Which I think gets
Which is-
confusing as just kind of state funding, because, I mean, that's where that first question.
Correct, but if your pupil units decrease because of a global pandemic, or not as many births, the district is forced to react to a lower enrollment, higher needs, versus this, it's not as, because it's not as dependent on a tax rate and a refinancing, that it really, it's a little more bulletproof, so to speak, on being able to promise, but you're absolutely right that no, we don't have a crystal ball beyond this legislative session of what will happen, but this is our goal, and this is what we can do with these dollars.
And we know right now, there's a clip, right now we for sure that we have 31 positions part-time or full-time that we will be eliminating. We have already committed to moving forward with a middle school model change. We've already invested in elementary. We've held on to half of the digital innovation staff already, so they're built into the budget. But we know we need even more, so that's why we don't have enough resources. And the positions here, reading interventionists, math interventionists, we are a district that is striving to be better, and we have students who need help, and we need these additional resources to not only maintain, but to continue to enhance what we do here. That has to be our story. That has to be the head, as you share. So now we look like we're, I'm sorry.
No, I just want to get back to the questions and make sure we define that clearly, how we would pick the 2 questions. So we can get back to that after your question.
This defining the 2 questions of the operational savings and financing technology of the capital projects levy is the easiest messaging.
So we
you
pick
can do.
either one of those questions,
You pick both of those.
pick both of them and attach it to the capital.
Well, that's
No,
actually
that's
posted in
that's what it is.
extended
So it's all-
slide 14.
We're
Slide
done
14.
then.
Oh, slide 14, I'm
Just
sorry.
do the whole, okay.
You're on slide, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you're on slide 13. I think it just got moved off.
Yeah,
It was on slide 14 for quite a while.
there you go.
Yeah,
Okay.
slide 14 is
Now,
the capital project levy question is on the right, and the structured bond refinancing according to that dotted chart is on the left. And that is the easiest way to say what you said about 20 minutes ago. Why can't we just say we're refinancing this on some debt and asking for technology levy?
Well, where I think I get pulled aside is when we share that there are other things we can do. We can do we can do a 7-period day. Well, I don't, if our question is that it's gonna be used on technology, I understand then that general fund is gonna allow us to keep our ESSER teachers right now because we won't have to use, I think, and that's where I get nervous about the fact, if our messaging is that we can also say, we can also look at a 7-period day, we can also say, and we can't do that, but we are using this money for technology, then I don't know why we're trying to message the other things. Unless we say that that's because we have money in our general fund to use. Or is our intent to use some of that 8 million?
Intent is to use some of the
Correct. I think, like you said, when we've been on the phone in our conversations, and the administration was so kind, my son played in the AAU tournaments, summer jam in St. Cloud for 3 days. So I was pacing outside the school. The only day there was a 30-mile-an-hour wind, and they were putting up with me on the phone. And we went through, we said, it's part and parcel of the technology is a component of this, but we're giving something to the elementary, we're giving something to middle school, and we're giving something to high school. So if you break it down to technology, elementary, middle, and high school, that's where I kept coming back, that really resonated with me as a outsider and a taxpayer. So then if you want, and then coming back and saying, we have a fiscal cliff because of ESSER, these positions were here, we'd like to maintain that. That's part and parcel too. That's happening at the elementary level, the middle school level, the primary level and secondary if you want to break it down that way. So that really resonated with me. If we can get to the 7-period day, I don't know how much research and how much you put in the budget and doing that, but it also, it's built in, so then it's part and parcel to, yeah, you can add to the conversation, but keep that, the main messaging, those 4, 5, 6, 7 points of this is what we're going to do with the money. And we know it seems a lot, but if you just take the dollar amount and focus, it's technology and services to the tune of $500 a student.
Did you want?
Yeah, it's good, I mean, we need to be in some ways conservative on our messaging because of exactly what Superintendent Knight, we can't overstate. So we kind of need to be conservative on our messaging, and I don't think we're here to kind of go over the details of that, even though I think we all can come up with great messaging. So we need to be conservative on our messaging of what we would use that money for. But we need to be specific in what we know we can be, like the technology piece. But, as I sit here, I'm just thinking, okay, so our decision to be thinking about now is, are we going to go with these 2 questions or the other questions? If we say that we're going to move ahead, then all of us sitting around here need to be totally committed to the work that's going to happen between now and November, because it's going to be a lot of work to be out there, and I think we all are. But that's part of what our thinking needs to be if we're going to move forward with this.
Which I agree, and that's really, I was kind of coming to the same thing, that we're kind of getting to the point of what is the governance question. And the governance question is not to be decided today, but to potentially be decided on Tuesday. are we interested in moving forward? Are we interested in moving forward with these questions? And so I don't think that we don't have to get into the detail of how we're messaging everything, but that will be done, and there will be a heavy lift to this. I know that from now through November, that's going to be the main thrust of a lot of our work. But the question before the board is really, do you feel like you have enough information now to let this percolate between now and Tuesday to make that vote? Or do you feel like you need more information and have additional questions? I would also say if you come up with questions between now and Tuesday, feel free to share them with us, and we can try to answer them to the best of our abilities. And I will also share some of the information that I put together and shared in the introduction in my update too. So, how are you feeling like you have most of the information that you need to make that decision, or do you feel like you have more questions that relate to that at this time?
I understand the question, right? Like I'm clear as to what we need to do and what questions when we think about the governance in terms of I'm supportive of a levy of bringing this forward, and I'm supportive of a levy. I would vote yes if this came to me, right? Where I'm a little bit murky and where I need some clarification is before I just slam down the green button, right? What does the plan look like moving forward as to how we efficiently bring this forward? Like, then what is the execution?
Yes.
So that's, we don't, because we're governance, we just say, yes, this looks great, let's do it. Do you have an idea of how you're going to operationalize this and be successful? Because you are going to be judged whether or not this passes or fails.
Yep, and I look at that.
I'm going to be honest with you.
Exactly. I look at this as, it's my first superintendency and my first levy or referendum, and just from a personal professional standpoint, the last thing I want to do is lose that. But I also know that it's very important for the kids and very important for the district right now. And we've talked about what the mechanisms need to be. And so when we've talked because there's trepidation. We have our public relations person is out right now, but that is not the main thrust of their work. Most of the work behind that is done both internally from administration as a whole and working with the board, but also there's a lot of external work that is done, a lot of professionals that do this day in, day out, and it'll be the bread and butter that we will have. If you want to speak to what happens now once this happens.
Can I just ask one quick question here before we move forward? So I'm comfortable from the governance side, so I'm saying, okay, I'm going to support you from the governance school board side. So then are you comfortable from the operational side as being the superintendent with your team? So that's the question that I need you to answer back to me.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm not naive in knowing that there's still a whole lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
And that when it comes to choosing priorities and selecting how we're going to allocate our time, this has to be a main lift for our administration between now and November, and we also need external resources to do it. But I'm going to have my shoulder into it, and if you think about, now that we're out of the main thrust of the pandemic, I've been able to join a variety of boards and get more deeply involved in the community than I have. And that's part of the work of superintendent, is to be external facing so that you can have that dialogue, so that you can work with different groups once you're you're armed with the messaging that you need. And I believe that when you have the top guns of messaging in the state and even some in the country.
Yeah, we really break it down. If you really break it down to, the messaging, back to school is a very important time, because you get a chance to be in front of all your personnel, and you have a very bright and shiny faced parent and student, and it's a new year, and we're selling hope, and that's a wonderful time to start this activity. And you take that the next 8 to 10 to 12 weeks, and you parlay that into the messaging that you did, the hard work there, to how many user groups can you folks and an administrator get in front of. So it might be pairing one of you and one of the administrators and saying, this is a group that I'm very familiar with and they have questions about the referendum. They would like more information. So that's in a nutshell, it's you tell two people, and getting that message out and rolling and trying to get as many people interested, but making sure that your parent group and your support groups are especially, what are you hearing, what does that information entail? And, ooh, that's not what we meant by that, how can we redo that, or how can we get back to that group and clarify it?
And I think that's a great question, Member Dieter, but then I also just go back to all of us really reflecting on our commitment to the lift. Because it can't just be administration.
No, totally agree.
It's got to be all of us saying, yep, we're going to be out there doing whatever it takes to help the community understand why we have this need.
Agreed.
And that's not an out of governance, you know, I don't know, I mean, we all are learning about governance versus, you know, intimately trying to help solve the problem, and, you know, I struggle with it, sometimes I want to. So if, as board members, we are completely, I mean, I know that we'll all, you know, well, when we vote, then we show that as board members, we must be going forward with a trusted administration and a team. And then then we are also then able to go into our communities and share why we voted for this idea.
I think that, one second. Okay, Kirby, did you?
I can see the need for this and support that, but I think messaging is by far the most crucial thing. Most of the voters do not have kids in the schools. And although the teachers want this and the staff wants it, and I understand, I want it, we're preaching to the choir. And what we have to preach is the people who don't come to church. And I think that's what we need to do. The staff and the teachers need to be really involved in supporting this in the ways that they can. Because I see one of the problems with two ballot questions, and Rosie said that two questions pass more than one, but what's at the bottom of each of those questions? This will raise your taxes. That's what people see when they go to the voting room. That's what they see. They're not, many will not read all of this stuff, so that's why they have to know before they get in there to kind of not look at what they're going to do. So the key is really to get that messaging really out there.
I agree. And in my, as part of my Minnesota licensure for superintendent, one of the requirements was to take a graduate course in Minnesota tax selection, and I took it through the University of Minnesota. And in the class where I got an A, but what we learned is that there are a variety of different methods for moving forward with the messaging. Sometimes a broad, loud, long message of this is what we want, this is what we need can be good. And other times there are opportunities where keeping it a little bit more quiet, but making sure that you're activating the yes vote and not making it a activation of all votes is important too. So striking that right balance with the strategists that do this every day will be important, right? Because you want to make sure you have as much of the choir there voting, and you also want to make sure that those who are going to come vote at least know the information. Would you say that's fair?
That's spot on. And I don't, you know, your governance question. How many of you attend the chamber with Superintendent Mays? At least one or two, right? And you're looking at user groups that you're present to answer questions. I guess I personally looked at a governance, but that's up to you to all answer for yourselves. In that this is what we're asking you as a community, and you sit on the board of that ask, and you have to have the ability to be armed with the information to provide an answer in my mind. and how you want to protect yourselves in this day and age from putting, that's why we say try to go out in pairs. Because it's very easy. Last night, with 100 people in a gym that was probably 98 degrees, there were several people that attacked the finance person. And I've been doing this so long, I don't even view it as attacks anymore. I look at this, they're asking for information, but we were there with the superintendent, we were there with board members, so that we could slow the roll in a public dialogue, that every person's question was answered last night. But every question that a person brought up was restated before we answered the question. Why would I say that in a public environment? Why does that have to happen? Because I have the ability now to project my voice across a meeting group and say, I believe this is a question you asked, I apologize if I'm paraphrasing it, but this is the question was asked, and now one of the board members or the superintendent or one of the professionals in the room have the opportunity to provide an answer, or other people can add on to that answer to show a few different perspectives to the public. But what that does is those little techniques, it's hard to have somebody keep a roll on, because you're not there you're there as a board member or administrator. You are only in the capacity of providing information. You are there to provide information so they can make an informed vote. 20% of the people will always vote yes, 20% of the people will always vote no. You're not there to challenge those 20%, you're not there to challenge the 60, you're there to provide information. And I see that as a long way around it to governance.
And I think there's guidance from our association on the do's and don'ts that
I helped write those.
Great. I appreciate all the time that we put into this as a board, because I think this is, we think about all the tough decisions we've made in the past 3 years, masks, no masks, in person, not in person. This is right up there. And like you said, Dr. Eder, that it's,
We're all going to be judged by it.
We're all going to be judged by it, and we're also going into a board election too, and I think that plays into it. So I think that doing this and doing it well is central to our purpose at this time for the kids.
And I think it's obvious, I hope it's obvious, but we're working in partnership with Baird. Their expertise is going to be where we're leaning. I would like to ask Baird, how many other districts right now are you helping with as they go through a referendum or an operating levy or whatever we call this? Is this an operating levy or is this a referendum, or are they?
I think we have to call it a referendum for now.
Okay.
It mimics an operating referendum. We have at least 10 to 12 going right now. Across the state.
Okay. Is that typical for you in every kind of cyclical thing, that it's usually 10 to 15 school districts that Baird works with?
And we, like you said, our heavy lifting is done. Now we will be bringing some ideas to the district for those communication specialists, and then they gather information from us. But other than focusing on that tax person.
Have you worked with us in our referendums?
Absolutely.
Okay, just our last one, that one that in 2018? That was my first year on the board.
Yep.
So you were with us through that?
I was helping behind the scenes, yes.
Okay.
So Virginia Grandstaff was in contact, yep.
I was just going to say two things. One is it might be helpful just for background for board members to have, and again, there were some articles recently with NSBA, but the last referendums in the state and what passed and what didn't, and how, just a summary of those, that might be just helpful for background. And then, the reason I would support this is because I also think that because of the local campaigns that are going on right now here at Duluth, people are thinking local right now, and they are thinking thoughtfully about our city and the roles of many things within our city. So it is a good opportunity in the timing right now to be moving this forward rather than waiting. And I think you stated too about some of the disadvantages of a general election, and there are many, but a bigger election. But so I think, kind of in thinking about that, I've been thinking a lot about that, just the races that are going on right now in Duluth are so local. And this gives us an opportunity, even within those races, as well as to educate the other candidates on why this is important as well. So there's some opportunities right now. So.
And how you would reflect on Member Lafleur-Kemp and also Member Eater, just your candid conversations with Superintendent was really helpful. Again, this is not new to us. We've been meeting with you and seeing and knowing that this was coming, so I've read and I'll continue to be educated by board members that have gone through more referendums than I have and listening, but I don't think I need any closed session or another session like this. So I support what we're going to do. I'll come ready on Tuesday to look at the 2 questions, unless other board members would like another session before Tuesday, or another special meeting after Tuesday just to vote on this, because maybe we're not ready. But I see myself being ready. But that, because bottom line, I'm going back to what I said 20 minutes ago. I just see this as 2 questions, refinancing our debt, and it'll be, and bringing what we're now looking at in our general fund and bringing it over to the facilities where it should have been maybe a while back, and going forward with an ask that says technology, and again, I'll work a little bit on that, but that's where my focus is, and my understanding. But again, as the chair, I would certainly want you to share with me whether or not we feel, and it can be as late as Tuesday afternoon, and we will, pull it off the agenda, or we will continue to have conversation at our school board meeting, and then schedule another meeting very quickly. But I'm getting a sense from you that most of us are willing to vote to go forward with this on Tuesday. Paul.
I thought actually when Member Eater asked Superintendent, his answer should have been yes and yes. He only had one yes. But and my answer is yes and yes. And just for clarification, because you mentioned it too, so question 1 is a referendum, but then the capital project levy is an operating levy, correct?
Or how would you answer?
It says here,
Both questions, I mean, whenever you ask the voters, we look at that loose term as a referendum.
Okay.
So these are 2 referendum questions in state statute. We have the ability to play with that title. We have 10 words in each of the titles of the ballot question to maneuver, so to speak. So if you wanted to say, and would probably be the best interest, is approval of school district capital projects levy referendum. Is add that referendum term in there, because then both would say approval of school district bond referendum and referendum. It would be both. It'd be much easier, as we're talking about over the next 16 weeks. It'll make it more consistent.
And that would be an interesting. So when the question, or I don't know if it would be formed in a resolution that we agree to, maybe we certainly don't want to lock ourselves into exactly these sample questions. We want to give our administration and our experts here a little wiggle room. So when we vote on Tuesday, wouldn't that make sense, not to really lock in exactly what's on here? Or would you have time to tweak it with what you all decide is best?
We could,
before Tuesday.
The idea of locking it in on the 18th of July was to give administration and the team time to get ready for beginning of school and give us an extra couple weeks. The alternative was for you as a school board to say that we would like to move forward with a 2-question election and direct administration to bring those questions back at our next regular scheduled meeting in August, prior to August 25th, the deadline to call for the election. That was our backup plan. We don't have, like I said, this is the head of the dog. We don't have a lot of we have very little wiggle room in how this is written. And so adding one more word in a title is we just don't have a lot of flexibility. And if you saw something that you didn't like, we could always revise it before the 25th of August at your August meeting if something came up. We'd have that flexibility.
So, on Tuesday, on the 18th, we will have a resolution from Mr. Tofty, right?
He's already got it, we've already got it prepared and written.
I just
and
looked at
drafted.
board agenda, isn't loaded yet, so I thought that's what Brett said, so.
And then you could always take it, and then if, you could take it off the agenda, sorry,
Yeah,
Sloan, I didn't.
that's okay. And it's not specific to what the question is anyway, it's just a resolution that the board is,
No, it has sample ballots
It
in the
has-
it's all written
Okay.
out, boom, boom, boom.
Perfect.
Here's election judges, here's this, here's
Okay.
that. Everything will be, ripped through that resolution to proceed
Perfect.
with the election.
Yeah, the resolution as drafted currently has this ballot language
okay.
identical in it
So
and lays
that
out
would be- that's-
the other information required by statute to call for the election.
Because of this committee structure moving to regular scheduled, we just had to make sure that if we're turning it around tonight for the agenda to go on tomorrow, that we had as much in line for you as possible to make it
We
seamless.
appreciate that.
So we can
Interrupt
load
Kim?
support.
I'm sorry.
So just to clarify, what we vote on has to be the exact wording. There isn't this wiggle room like, oh, do some more with it. What we're voting on has to be,
If we put a resolution in front of you calling for the election, then it would be the exact wording. If we were looking for a resolution to be adopted to please proceed with the referendum, which then lets your public and newspaper hang for 3 to 4 weeks, it may be really windy where I brought that up in our meeting when I was outside the gymnasium, talking with your administration and Matt on the phone. But I think I heard crickets when we said, that's a nice fallback position, Michael, but that 4 weeks of wondering and putting all of us on the front to say, well, what are we gonna do? Oh, just wait, it's coming. Just wait, it's coming. That was not a preferred option, but we could certainly do it.
And I think it's important for us to have that in place. We have a lot of different events, kind of like you mentioned with beginning of school. We have our Unity in the Community event. Lots of opportunities to get the message out about this. And so having that message pinned down, or having the questions pinned down so we can pin down the message is important. And I want to come back to your very direct, but very powerful question. My yes is, yes, I believe that this is the right choice for us. Yes, I believe that we have the capacity to put a huge amount of effort in this and have a really good showing for what the election will entail, and that we will accomplish what we would need to do to have a successful election. You can't guarantee what the voters will decide, but I believe we can get this passed, and I also believe that we have the internal capacity to do so. Is there a chance that it won't pass? Of course, but I feel very hopeful, and I feel confident. And I also believe that when we weigh the two, it's not 100% chance it'll pass, but if we don't do anything, it's 100% chance that we're going to have the ESSER cliff, and we're going to have the impacts of that. So I've always been somebody who, no matter what the circumstances are, you go hard for what you need. And so that's what I believe we need to do. So
And if you'd
that's
asked-
my yes is 100%.
If you'd have asked this same question, to the administrative team in April, not one of your administrators would have said yes. Every administrator might have said, we need to charge forward and try to do what's right for our district. But not one of them was at that point that they were comfortable, that they said, we're ready to lead a referendum. I think that's amazing, what they've been able to do as an administrative team and move themselves forward and really dive deep into, okay, what does this mean legislatively? What are these dollars? What are we doing with that curriculum piece? What are we gonna think? And so, just watching that maturation from the outside, I'm not doing that because I'm sitting in front of you and making large dollars on this transaction. I'm doing it because that maturation has been pretty neat to see. And I'm the son of a superintendent that was one of the best superintendents in the state for his 25 years. And I didn't know that until he retired, because his peer group came and told me. So I have an extremely high expectation of superintendents especially, but administrators. And it's pretty neat to see this group come together and say, boy, we're coming at a time where they're really funded education. We're gonna ask our constituency for more, because this is the right thing to do. And for them to be able to come together and say, we think we're ready to do that, that's saying something.
I totally agree, and my question was, because he's confident, then I'm confident, right? When I hear the yes from the team, I'm like, I'm on board, let's go do this. The yes is important.
But and what I was trying to say was, that yes isn't,
Exactly.
it's not that, it's a maturation point the last many months that all this work is needed to get to be able to even remotely think about saying yes. And the team is, it's coming together.
And we had to wait to see what the state was gonna do.
Yeah.
And that's why we weren't ready in April, because we didn't know what the state was gonna say. Now we know what the state has said, and we need to lead the charge to do what's right for the kids.
Member Sadowski?
Yeah, I would just weigh in absolutely, yes, yes, and yes. I think the sooner we solidify it, the better, just because, the rest of July and August is gonna go fast. And I think, to your point of the beginning of school, getting that messaging out there, the different events that are coming up, I thought Dr. Kirby made a really good point though about those are the ones that are gonna be a little easier to get on board, so we have to work hard, and I'm willing to work hard as a board member and as a parent in the district, and whatever we need to do.
On the doors.
On the doors.
And you've got a hardworking board. As much as you've seen the maturation in our leadership, this board has really done phenomenal things in the last, we have been together now for at least 2 years, right? This is your second year? Second year.
Seven.
So, but many of us have been on for 4, 5, 6, 7 years together. And we also have become stronger. We have become a board that knows and has confidence in our administrators as well, which gives us confidence to go out and do the work that we need to do as well. So it's a good time.
Thank you.
Do we have the resolution?
We will,
To go.
on the way home.
Okay. That's what I'm worried about now.
Absolutely, yeah, title, yep.
And our board book comes out tomorrow, so
Right.
board members will be able to review and look at that.
And like you said, it's 24-hour rule, when you talk to a teacher, principal, coach, what have you, you have the right to say on Tuesday that if it needs to be taken off the agenda, you have the right to decide on that.
Thank you.
Board Chair, that concludes our presentations for Cal meeting.
So we're adjourned.